Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, I think I was the last to know, because I was on an aeroplane coming back from Italy, where I spent a couple of days fishing over the weekend, and I got to Stansted Airport, and I turned the phone on, and it was bleep, 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 and yes, Mrs. May had decided to call a general election, which, if you think about what she said in the past, is perhaps surprising. I mean, here she is back in June last year when she launches her leadership bid.
Our country needs strong, proven leadership to steer us through this period of economic and political uncertainty. There should be no general election until 2020.
And here she is in September.
I'm not going to be calling a snap election. I've been very clear that I think we need that period of time, that stability, to be able to deal with the issues that the country is facing and have that election in 2020.
But I've been saying I thought she probably should have an election. I said this back in November.
I don't trust Parliament on this. Yes, the neatest, cleanest way to finish this off is for May to call a general election on the basis that Brexit means Brexit.
In an ideal world, what she would do, I think, now is to call an early general election to try and get a big working majority.
And it's a theme that we continued and we debated on this programme over the course of the last few months. I have to say, I perhaps am somewhat less surprised than most people by what's been announced today, because today, this is what she said.
Division in Westminster will risk our ability to make a success of Brexit, and it will cause damaging uncertainty and instability to the country. So we need a general election, and we need one now, because we have, at this moment, a one-off chance to get this done while the European Union agrees its negotiating position and before the detailed talks begin. I have only recently and reluctantly come to this conclusion. Since I became Prime Minister, I have said that there should be no election until 2020. But now I have concluded that the only way to guarantee certainty and stability for the years ahead is to hold this election and seek your support for the decisions I must take.
So it really is a snap election, because it's taking place 6 weeks from today. And for a lot of voters in England who live in the counties, of course, it means they've got 2 elections coming up, because on May the 4th, all the English counties vote as well. So those voters are going to be asked to vote twice within the space of a single month. Tonight, I want to know from you, with 6 weeks to go, tell me, who would you vote for and why? I would also ask a little teaser. Why do you think she's called the election? Now, you know, there are lots of reasons for it, but what do you think? Is there some secret reason why she's called this election? So if you think, you know what, she's doing a great job, she says Brexit means Brexit, I'm really confident, I'm going to vote for her, call me on 0345 60 60 973. But if you think perhaps Jeremy Corbyn has a cunning plan and is going to pull a remarkable rabbit out of the hat over the course of the next few weeks, then of course you can text to 84850. You might think the Lib Dems, UKIP, the Greens or somebody else is going to come storming through and surprise everybody. In that case, you can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and you can, of course, watch this on LBC's Facebook page right now. So she's called this election. Parliament will be dissolved on the 3rd of May, ahead of the election. They've already said, Downing Street, there will be no leaders' debates in this election, which I think is a bit of a shame. I was sorry there were so many runners and riders last time. It looked a bit like the first fence at the Grand National with all those different parties represented, but I think we've actually come to a point where people expect there to be leaders' debates. But of course, she goes into this with a lead of about 20 points. Now, what does that convert to? Is it going to be a majority of 80 seats? Is it going to be a majority of 150 seats? Well, none of us yet quite know. So I suppose many will say she's called this election because she's massively ahead in the polls. There'll never be a better opportunity. Labour is incredibly weak, and she gives herself legitimacy as Prime Minister, which she didn't really have. I know we don't, in theory, vote for Prime Ministers in general elections, but I think in reality these days we probably do. And she also can argue with Brexit that there's no more interference going to come from the House of Lords and everything else. So maybe that's why she called the election. But I am not so sure. You remember that at the time of the 2015 general election, the Conservative Party, in some of the marginal seats, were really, really worried about UKIP, desperate to stop UKIP breaking through in significant numbers into the House of Commons. And they spent a lot of money in those constituencies. Now, again and again, figures have been produced to suggest that in some seats, one in Kent in particular that I can think of, they've overspent the limits considerably. All of this is in the hands of the Crown Prosecution Service. In some cases, the police are still investigating. And although I've generally always thought the establishment never turns on itself, I've become convinced over the last few weeks that actually a whole slew of by-elections are bound to come up over the course of the rest of this year. And just think, Zach Goldsmith, a very popular MP for Richmond, called that by-election and lost it to the Liberal Democrats. I think the Tories were terrified of something breaking over the course of the next few months, by-elections to be held in September, certainly a dozen seats in which there was a possibility of a by-election, some say perhaps even as high as 20, and that for a government with a working majority of 12. And I have to pay credit to somebody on this. He was, for a period, a presenter on LBC. He's still a contributor, and he does Channel 4 News Politics every evening, and his name is Michael Crick. And to those who live and breathe and work in politics, he's not always the most popular person. In fact, Michael Howard said, when he was leader of the Tory party, the one thing he never wanted to hear was, Michael Crick's in reception and he wants to speak to you. He is an investigative journalist. He's the guy that turned the screw on the massive overspending in by-elections and at the general election. So perhaps this is a bit of a Michael Crick by-election. And, you know, you have to hand it to him. He's good at what he does. So I think that everything added up together, the fact they're in the lead, the fact that it's a chance for her to legitimise her position, to have a different manifesto, which certainly on areas like education is miles away from what David Cameron put forward back in 2015. But I think they were genuinely scared of what could happen in a series of by-elections. I wonder, I'm going to go to Martin in Ealing. Good evening, Martin. How are you going to vote on the 8th of June?
Hello, Nigel. To be honest with you, I am a UKIP voter, and I am going to be voting Conservative at this general election. I honestly and truthfully do not think that UKIP voters should, at this particular stage of Brexit, play party politics with the future of our country. We voted, 4 million of us voted last time, and we got one MP. I think what you, Nigel, which we follow religiously, and Paul Nuttall should say to all UKIP voters, throw your weight behind the Conservatives. If it is that difficult for you to do, just hold your nose and put your cross there so that we can save Brexit. We have worked very hard to get to where we've got to. Yeah. And I do not want to see us lose it at the last hurdle.
Well, you could argue, Martin, that one of the reasons that we had the referendum is that the impact of those 4 million votes is that we hurt the Labour Party very much more than we hurt the Conservative Party. I mean, seats like Warwickshire North, that the Labour Party had sort of number 2 on their hit list, and UKIP get 8,000-9,000 votes and the Tories win it comfortably. So maybe, Martin, the effect these days of a UKIP vote is that it actually helps the Conservative Party, particularly in the Midlands and the North and areas like that. I would also say, Martin, that over the course of the last few weeks on this show, I have talked about some nervousness. I've talked about the fact that when it comes to getting back our fishing waters, the government won't commit to it. I've talked about the fact that she's happy, Mrs May, to keep as part of the European arrest warrant, which means the European Court of Justice ultimately still has some say over this country. I've said I'm very worried about what's going to happen with immigration when we hear talk of transitional arrangements. Is it possible, Martin, that Theresa May fights this election from an unassailable position wins a big majority saying Brexit means Brexit, and then actually, because she hasn't got the 2019 deadline followed immediately by a general election, then starts to make a whole series of concessions, meaning that Brexit voters don't get what they want. And in those circumstances, isn't the UKIP voice and the UKIP argument that rather than going through years of negotiations, we should just get on with this? Isn't that an important voice?
The UKIP voice is very important, but at the end of the day, we are coming to a point where now we are having a general election, and the only people that's going to make any difference for us that we are going to have our Brexit is going to be the Conservatives. If the Conservatives lose a proportion, at the end of the day, the Conservatives seem to think that they have a 20-point lead in front of Labour. Mm-hmm. But if the Lib Dems and Labour do a pact where they don't put up MPs in certain areas, I think the Conservatives could catch a cold.
Well, Martin, I mean, you know, OK, but the Lib Dems and Labour absolutely hate each other. They can't stand the sight of each other. And the fact that it's a snap election and the fact there's only a few weeks to get nominations in, I would have thought, Martin, makes a deal of that kind extremely unlikely. Nothing's impossible, but unlikely. But, Martin, I do repeat the point, and thank you for what you had to say, but I do repeat the point that the UKIP voice is very, very important, and a big majority for Theresa May without that 2020 deadline could mean all sorts of transitional arrangements and a very, very soft Brexit. But, I mean, those of you out there that disagree with that, please do come on. Let me know. Everyone's going to have their say, including Sonia from Colchester. Good evening, Sonia.
Hiya, Nigel.
How are you going to vote, Sonia?
Tory.
Going to vote Tory. Do you normally vote Tory?
Well, I didn't in the last election because we had a strong Lib Dem here and Bob Russell was a good MP, but I will this time round, yeah.
So you're a Lib Dem voter switching to the Tories?
I've always been Tory, but because I live in Colchester now, I voted Lib Dem, but he lost to Will Quint, so...
Do you, I mean, Sonia, tell me, do you think, I mean, I presume you're a Brexit voter too, are you?
Yes, I am, yeah.
Yep. I mean, do you feel confident that Mrs May is going to deliver you the Brexit that you really wanted?
Do you know what, Nigel? I think she will, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I think that she's, you know, she's got a lot of backing from a few MPs on her side. So yeah, and she has to because it's the will of the people. You know, 52% voted, and I think Jeremy Corbyn's going to be toast. To be honest, Labour's going to be toast, and I think UKIP supporters should vote Tory in this election to make sure that the Tory government has got a majority.
Do you know, Sonia, I heard that in the 2001 general election. I've heard it again and again and again, that what UKIP should do is back the Tories and they'll sort everything out for us. And the evidence over the last many, many decades is that actually very often they don't. But Sonia, I thank you very much for your sincere support for our Prime Minister. Right now, you're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:15. So if, like me this morning, you've just got off a long-distance flight and you don't know the news, Theresa May has called a snap general election and it's going to take place on the 8th of June. Just 6 weeks for now. And those of you listening in the English counties will be voting on the 4th of May in your county elections and again on the 8th of June in a general election. I am not myself particularly surprised. I've been saying for a long time I thought she had to do this, that there would never be a better opportunity for her to do it, but that also, as I said just a few minutes ago, there was this big shadow of willful breaking of the law by the Conservative Party in 2015 and indeed in some by-elections ahead of 2015. So desperate were they to stop the threat from UKIP. And I have some breaking news on this. I talked about Michael Crick earlier. Well, he's just broken this, that the CPS have told Channel 4 News tonight that they are considering charges against more than 30 individuals. Wow. So does this mean that some of the people who are hoping to be candidates for the Conservative Party in the general election could face the prospect during the campaign or shortly thereafter of actually potentially being arrested and charged? Does it mean that Mrs May knew this was coming down the tracks? And I did speculate 15 minutes ago that they knew something bad was coming down the tracks. They have a working majority of 12. facing perhaps a whole slew of by-elections between now and the end of the year, all of which, as we saw from Zach Goldsmith, losing Richmond, were unpredictable. Is she now going to throw these 30 individuals under a bus and say you can't be our candidates, and this is now the new clean Tory party? I don't know the answers to that, and I didn't stage manage this. I didn't know at the top of the hour at 7 that this was going to break, but it kind of makes real sense to me. Nathan Groves from Eton Wick on text says, roll on the 8th of June, the day we finally get to say farewell to Mr Corbyn. Yes, and you'd probably get McDonnell in his place. This sounds like the master plan to cancel Brexit. I envisage the formation of the Ramona Alliance Party, followed by endless doom and gloom predictions from your good self, says Les. I'm not doomy or gloomy, Les. I'm bullish and upbeat and optimistic, provided we do actually get Brexit, break free, and give ourselves the ability to open ourselves up to the 85% of the global economy that is not in the European Union. Another text. I'm a former Tory, now UKIP voter, but I'll be voting Tory again this time, purely because I think Mrs May is our best hope of getting the hard Brexit we voted for. And that's from Martin in Hemel Hempstead. I do understand that at the moment, the Prime Minister does have a lot of confidence in people because she gives very good speeches, but does she actually deliver? And when she was Home Secretary, when she gave those big barnstorming Tory speeches on how she was going to cut immigration, did she succeed? No, she failed completely. And I think it's important that there are voices there that make sure that this is kept on course. Steve in Croydon, 6 weeks' time, how are you going to vote and why?
I'm going to vote Jeremy Corbyn, Nigel. And the reason I'm going to do that is I think Theresa May's pretty weak calling an early general election. I think she wants to get out while the going's good because she's scared of Brexit when it kicks in big time with all the negotiations and everything. They've made a mess of the NHS. They want to privatise that.
Hang on, Steve. It was Mr. Blair was the man that started privatising swathes of the NHS, wasn't he?
Well, I don't know about that, but what I do think about Mr. Blair is he's not a genuine Labour person, whereas Jeremy Corbyn is, and people like, I think, Blair was a Tory, a plastic Tory in disguise. But I think someone like Jeremy Corbyn, he cares about minimum wage. He wants to put that up for the working class people. He's a genuine person. He's strong to have taken all that, all those attacks for God knows how long, and he's still standing. He cares about the NHS. He cares about schools. Well,
let me ask you, Steve, let me ask you a question, right? Okay, yeah. You're a Jeremy Corbyn fan. Let me ask you a question. For 33 years, as a backbench Labour MP, he voted against every single European treaty, every single attempt for Britain to become more deeply inveigled in this European political project. He opposed it on the principled Bennite grounds that it meant a loss of democracy for this country. Can you tell me what Jeremy Corbyn's plan for Brexit is now?
Well, he'll have to go with the flow, won't he? Look, let's be honest, Theresa May and Boris Johnson...
What flow?
And the European... joining the European thing.
But where are this man's principles, Steve? I mean, you're selling me Corbyn as this great principled man that cares, and I'm saying to you that on the most important political issue of our day, he's turned his back on what he stood for 33 years, and he now is fighting this election. And I honestly, Steve, for the life of me, I don't know what his current policy on Brexit really is.
Well, do we know what Theresa May's is? I don't think anyone does. I don't think she's got a clue. I don't think any Tory's got a clue. But I think Jeremy Corbyn is a genuine bloke, and he will get things done to the best of his ability, and the best of his ability will be better than the Tories and the Liberals.
Well, like him or not, Steve, I'm afraid he's going to get absolutely mullered, I think, in these elections. He's going to have a terrible time. He doesn't really connect. He seems to represent a sort of very cliquey North London view of somewhat outdated socialism. Where I do agree with you, Steve, is I generally... I mean, obviously I've criticised him over Brexit, but I generally think... that he is not a sort of backbiting, backstabbing politician in the way that so many are. And I'm sure the fact that he genuinely cares is right. Steve, I get it. You're a Corbynista. I thank you for your call. I wonder, the opinion polls at the moment are showing Labour on 25%, 24%. Is that the bottom? Or could they fall further over the course of the following weeks? And I suspect they could. I'm going to go to Matthew in Heathrow. Matthew, how are you going to vote in 6 weeks' time?
Hi, Nigel. Well, you got it right again about the election. Basically, I've always been a Conservative voter, but I'm not happy with the way they've been handling the Brexit. And basically, I was a Remainer, accepted we've got to get a better deal, a new deal in Europe. So I'm either going to vote UKIP or the Liberal Democrats, just so because I want the next government to be a coalition, because really all the parties should be involved. I want to try to stop the breakup of the UK, because I could see the way the Conservatives are going, not listening to the other parties. If everyone's on the table, we're going to get a better deal, and it's the country's future, and that's why.
OK, well, I'm just curious, Matthew, because for a Remain voter to consider voting UKIP in this general election it's quite a leap in a way, isn't it?
Well, it's because I see at the moment it's Labour Conservative. Obviously, Conservatives got them all, but we've got to basically we need a coalition. So basically, we need the Remainers to maybe vote for the Liberal Democrats, and we need the Leavers to vote for UKIP. So that way, everyone could be involved in the negotiations if it's a coalition government. And, I mean, what might secure my vote? Are you actually going to be standing? Are you ready to...
Oh, Matthew.
Even as an MP, I know.
I keep being asked this. I keep being asked this question, Matthew. I keep being asked it, and I won't answer you right now, but I thank you for your call and your thoughts, because I'm going to go to Scott, who's calling from Thanet, who I suspect might be asking a similar question. I don't know. Scott, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Yes, he's just gazumped me right there. I was actually ringing you. We actually had a dinner together in Broadstairs a couple of years ago. I don't know if you remember, but we had a political dinner which you was invited along to.
I was. Yes, I was.
You was. Yeah.
And it wasn't quite as windy that night as it sounds now in Broadstairs tonight, so the line's not great. So give us your question, Scott, and I'll do my best to answer it.
Well, I was going to ask, obviously, as you say, UKIP, it's an important voice right now. You did say, I think it was about mid-March on the politics show that you might, you don't know, you might. So You just said to the man you're not going to tell him. But, obviously everyone in South Thanet at the moment is asking whether or not you will.
Right, Scott, I think it was a rotten line, but it's nice to hear from you again. And I will answer that question by saying I haven't decided yet. I will spend the next couple of days working it out. There's a bit of me that wants to, because I do feel that the conduct of one of my opponents in that general election was frankly absolutely bloomin' disgraceful, and I think justice should be done in more than one way. So there's a big bit of me that says I want to do it. There's another bit of me that says, I spent all those years in politics battling away for Brexit, and I'm still leading a group in the European Parliament, and that European Parliament is going to have a bigger say over the Brexit process than the UK Parliament, because under Article 50, they have the final right of veto. Where best could I serve Brexit? Could I serve it by running and trying to win that South Thanet seat, or could I serve it best by continuing where I am, leading a group in the European Parliament? Scott, I've got to make that decision, over the course of the next couple of days, and I will. I certainly haven't made it yet. Tim on Facebook says, vote wrong, and we could end up with a Labour-Lib Dem coalition. I don't think that would go too well. The numbers, Tim, do not back up that assertion at all. Farage says the worst thing for Brexit negotiations would be a coalition government. If you look at the opinion polls, and I know they can be wrong, but can they be that wrong? I think we're looking at probably a massive Tory majority. I think we're looking in many ways at the least contested general election we've had in modern times. Janice says Jeremy Corbyn doesn't know what he's doing. Tories all the way. James says May was useless as Home Secretary. I don't think she will deliver Brexit. And Mark says May Day in June, time to vote Conservative to give Theresa May the mandate to implement Brexit once and for all. Well, Mark, if she really meant it, you would certainly be right. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30 and time for the news with Rupert Bartier.
The Prime Minister is being accused of opportunism after...
On LBC. Snap general election, and it's taking place on the 8th of June. Everyone's surprised. I'm not particularly. I always thought politically it would offer Theresa May massive advantage, but I also have been thinking for some time that actually there are going to be a lot of by-elections coming down the track because of bad behaviour and overspending by the Conservative Party in the 2015 general election. And that's rather been backed up tonight with the Crown Prosecution Service saying they are considering charging 30 individuals. And that has to include sitting members of Parliament too. So that crisis is serious, and I think May feels by holding this election she can put it behind her and say we are the new, clean Tory party. One other story, which may have been relegated today given all that's going on, and I guess over the course of the next 6 weeks we may not feature on it very much. I said to you that I've been in Italy for the weekend. Well, I was. I was up on the Adriatic coast, but in southern Italy, it's been quite a dramatic weekend. 8,500 refugees and migrants have been plucked from small boats over the past 3 days, the Italian Coast Guards told CNN today. 13 dead bodies were recovered, including a pregnant woman and an 8-year-old boy, but it's not known, of course, how many others may have drowned before vessels were sighted. Remember, thousands of people have drowned over the course of the last few years. It's the summer. I've said on this show over the course of the last few weeks that relations with Turkey have been breaking down. You will see that Erdogan won his referendum for vastly increased presidential powers. He's already flexing his muscles. He's saying, unless you give free and easy access to the European Union for our 77 million Turkish population, the deal for us to hold back migrants will effectively be broken. I think that this whole issue, this whole European migrant crisis, is going to become absolutely enormous over the course of the next few months, and may well have big implications for elections taking place across the whole of Europe. I mention it. I know it's not what we're discussing tonight, but this will not go away. So back to the basic question of who would you vote for and why in this general election, and your messages flooding in on Facebook. Tim says vote wrong and we could end up with a Labour Lib Dem coalition. I don't think that would go too well. Richard says, I will vote Labour when they start making the working man's life better. Not going to happen, is it? Conservative landslide all the way. Brian says Theresa May has absolutely no competition in this. It does look a bit like that, Brian, I have to say. Dave says, I'm UKIP through and through, but I know UKIP will not be able to field a strong enough government. There is no way on this earth I would vote for Labour. So it's going to be the Tories until UKIP can strengthen their team. And Christine says, I'll be voting Labour. Can't live through another Tory government. Dave is probably voting Tory. Labour over a mess. Lib Dems practically non-existent. UKIP come close, but now the job is done. I don't think the Lib Dems are practically non-existent. In fact, what Tim Farron has managed to do since the referendum is to get the Lib Dems onto a very, very active campaigning basis. They've been doing very well every Thursday in little by-elections that take place for district councils, county councils, unitary authorities. They've done quite well raising money. He's positioned the Lib Dems as the party of the Remainer, of the I can't live with this result, it's got to be overturned, we must have another referendum. And however much I disagree with that position and believe it to be fundamentally, well, not liberal or democratic actually, but that's not really the point. Farron actually has done rather well recently with the Liberal Democrats, and they'll be pushing very, very hard in parts of the southwest of England, which is where Farron was today. They'll be pushing hard in parts of southwest London. And I would expect the Lib Dem vote to go up from the last general election and for them to win some more seats. Maybe not that many, but I think they will win some more seats. I'm going to go next to Mark in Haverfordwest in Pembrokeshire. What are you going to do, Mark, in this election?
I really don't know, Nigel. I haven't got a clue anymore.
Right.
To be quite honest about it, I just like to put something to you, really.
Yeah.
Which I'm a little bit disappointed. I met you, I think, in Neath, Port Talbot last year.
Yeah.
You had a meeting up there, and I attended that meeting. So we only just seen each other. I was seeing you were smoking your head off.
Was I? That sounds about right, Mark. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. But the thing is, what I'd like to say anyway is that politics, as far as I'm concerned, I had no interest at all until you, as party leader of UKIP, raised my blood and got me to become an addict, basically, on what you were saying. It made perfect sense as regards to where our country has stood since the EU membership has grown into something else it was never formed to be. And I became an avid supporter of you and watched everything from you. But the thing is, what I find strongly, well, put it this way, you were always 100% saying that I will fight to get this country out of the EU,
Yep.
free of it, because that was your main goal. You were in it for 20-odd years before you were a businessman before, and you were going to fight tooth and nail until you got this country out. When you brought the country, you woke up everybody, really, and everybody that you spoke to, your name was always mentioned, and that was the one that carried everybody along, really, on a wave. And then you decided you left, and you said, well, look, I've done my job, and I've got the referendum, and that does it. But what this has done now, I think, to be quite honest, I feel that maybe what you've actually done is killed Brexit completely, because everybody followed UKIP because of you. You made people believe you, you know what I mean? And there's nobody in UKIP that can do it. Only you. That's the only person I see. But you seem to have pulled away, and good luck to you in all respects.
Well, Mark.
Where we stand now, I feel, is that we could end up with, coalition governments, and that would be the end of Brexit completely.
Well, Mark, I don't think there is any prospect of there being a coalition government at the end of this general election. And by the way, if you think there is, then you've got a lot of you can make some real money on that, because you get a very, very good shade of odds from any bookmaker on it. My position, Mark, was we'd won a referendum that I'd spent nearly a quarter of a century pushing for, and I felt I'd done my bit as leader of the party. But I was then, and I am still today, absolutely committed to us getting Brexit, for it to actually happen. And the dilemma, Mark, I've got is, how best do I do that? Do I do that by putting my name forward to try and get into the Westminster Parliament, or do I do that by being the leader of a group in the European Parliament with actually an unparalleled platform in terms of speaking time and everything else that I can do? I don't know, Mark. I'm not sure where I'm most effective, but I want to reassure you that I haven't walked away, I haven't gone away, and I'm absolutely dedicated to us getting back our right to run our country, make our laws, make our friends around the world, and control our borders. So, Mark, keep faith, please.
Just the last thing, let me just say this.
Yeah.
If you don't come together now to bring all the people back together like you did when it was UKIP, over in the EU Parliament, fine, okay, but the people over here don't know about that. We find what we know on the internet. But leading up to this election, I feel like this is a referendum all over again. You know what I mean? And I think you're the only one that can lead it to get everybody, because they'll only believe you.
Mark, you're very flattered by those comments, and thank you very much indeed for making those points as passionately as you did. I've got a call from Vienna. Femi in Vienna, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Farage.
Good evening. You're an overseas UK voter, yeah?
Yes.
Yep, OK. So how are you going to vote?
I'll be voting for the Lib Dems.
Yep, OK. Do you normally vote for the Lib Dems?
I did last time, but prior to that I was voting Labour, but I've been kind of disillusioned with respect to Corbyn in relation to Brexit. OK. And, I did say a few minutes ago that I thought the Lib Dem vote would go up from what they got in the last general election, and they would probably win a few more seats. You, of course, would agree with that. What is your main reason for wanting to vote Lib Dem? Well, having studied EU law and therefore knowing what the single market is, I know that I know the economic effect of being out of it. Things like, for example, things like mutual recognition, harmonisation, these are terms that weren't even mentioned during the referendum.
Horrendous, horrible terms, aren't they?
Horrendous. For example, mutual recognition means that we can sell our products in exactly the same way across the 28 member states, whereas once we're out, countries are under no obligation to accept our products if they don't meet their rules. We're at a significant competitive disadvantage if we're no longer in the single market.
Femi, I was a trader, Femi, before getting into politics. And do you know what? When things are different, you often finish up with more business, more competition, and a better price for consumers. So there is a counter-argument to that.
There's a counter-argument to the fact that if we're outside of the single market, if we wanted to sell our products in all 28 member states, we'd have to sell our product in 28 different ways, manufacture our products in 20 different ways.
Fantastic.
Completely blowing up our marginal costs.
How exciting.
It would make it makes it far less profitable to actually trade across the EU. And now you were saying a couple of minutes ago how you were unsure as to whether or not you wanted to be an MEP or an MP because you're not sure whether or not you'd be able to serve your country more as an MEP or as an MP.
Yep.
don't you think that typifies exactly the issue, that because by leaving the EU, by getting rid of the 73 MEPs that the UK currently has in Europe, that's 10% of the European Parliament. We're cutting down our power on the international scale. The very fact that you yourself,
Femi, outside of the European Union, we get back our ability to negotiate trade on our own basis with the 85% and growing of the world economy that is not an EU member, but you are a Euro fanatic and you're voting Lib Dem, and I think, actually, you're with the right party. It makes total logical sense. Right now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:45. Snap general election is certainly leading to a lot of opinion, a lot of comment, and Gillian says voting for UKIP will give Labour and the Lib Dems an advantage. Vote for May so she can deliver Brexit without Remainers blocking it. Gillian, it's probably the opposite, actually. I think probably the UKIP vote, not probably, certainly the UKIP vote at the last election hurt Labour far more than it hurt the Conservatives. It's rather a myth to think that. But, you know, a lot of people do think that. I mean, Jacqueline says everyone who wants Brexit has to vote Conservative. No other party will see Brexit through. And this is what May's done so well. You know, don't forget, Jacqueline, she voted Remain. On the biggest constitutional question of our lifetime, she voted Remain. She gives very good speeches. She says some good things on the platform. I've praised her for what she's said. And then when she's not on the platform, and we get the briefings that I'm hearing in Brussels as an MEP, such as we're prepared to trade away fish in return for a trade deal on goods and services, I start to get worried. But she has, to date, sold herself very well on this. John on Facebook says Corbyn can't sort out his own party, let alone the country. And Tom is really worried. He says the thing I really worry about is the Remain camp will all vote for Farron and try and cause another referendum. Tom, they won't all vote for Farron, but the Lib Dems will do a bit better than last time. Of that, I'm pretty sure. William in Glasgow. Politics there, fascinating as ever. How are you going to vote?
I'm going to vote for the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party.
That's Ruth, led by Ruth Davidson, who I think any objective analysis would say has had quite a good run.
I think she's been a decent opposition, the kind of main opposition to Nicola Sturgeon, certainly in Hollywood. And I think it'll be a good point for the people of Scotland to show whether they've got the appetite for Indy Ref 2 or not. I think it couldn't come at a better time, maybe not for England, but for Scotland certainly, because it's our chance to show that we have no appetite for a second independence referendum. And if they return another 56 people, then Scotland, they're going to put the gun to their head again. They've missed the bullet the first time. They've put the gun again to their head. And to be honest with you, as a Scot, they will deserve all that they get.
Yeah, I mean, William, there is lots of polling here that suggests that actually the appetite for a second Scottish referendum is very low indeed.
No chance.
You know, and by the way, I hate the word independence referendum. It's not, because they want to be part of the European Union. I suspect, William, that the Conservatives are going to do a lot better in Scotland than they've done for a very long time. And how do you vote normally, William?
I voted Conservative since 1987. I first voted for the late, great Margaret Thatcher.
Right.
She's been a hero of mine throughout.
I tell you what,
my days.
If you walk into a pub in Glasgow after this show and say very loudly that I'm a Margaret Thatcher supporter, what sort of response would you expect, William?
I've been a supporter for over 30 years. I thought the poll tax was one of the fairest tax that was ever introduced.
Yeah, but my question was, there aren't many Glaswegians who openly admit to being Thatcherites, are there?
They have a chip on their shoulder from something that happened 50, 100 years ago. You know, they go back to the days of coal. If you want coal mines, bring back the steam engine. I'm sorry, the horse and cart was a great invention, but when the motor car came in, it was outrageous. If you want to go back to coal and coal miners, bring back the steam engine and get rid of electric and diesel.
William,
Thatcher cleared the way to
hugely entertaining, and thank you very much. And have to say, I've spoken in public meetings in Glasgow, and I've travelled around Glasgow, and I haven't met many Thatcherites as strong as William. Though, interesting point, in the it's a long time ago, the 1955 general election, the Conservatives got more votes in Scotland than any other political party. It seems almost phenomenal, doesn't it, that they were wiped down just to one seat in the House of Commons, and maybe Ruth Davidson's party are going to do much better in 6 weeks' time. Craig in Newcastle, how are you going to vote, Craig, in hard Labour territory?
Oh, it's definitely Labour.
Yep.
It's always going to be Labour, and it always will be. A lot of people are forgetting Jeremy Corbyn is a face of a party. He's not the party. And it's a case of things might start getting sorted if people stop seeing it like that.
Craig, can I just ask you? You said Labour and it'll always be like. I mean, would you back Labour regardless of its policies and regardless of its leader?
Not always. It depends on how I would see things at the time. But I mean, so far I've always voted Labour since I was old enough to vote.
OK, well, the Labour Party have big majorities in your part of the world, but there are seats up there, seats like Hartlepool, where their majorities are very, very small. And if the polls impact, Craig, on this election the way that some suggest, it will be Labour-held seats in the Midlands and the North, where they haven't got very big majorities, where Corbyn is doing pretty badly. And I do get your point, Craig, that you're voting for a candidate, you're voting for a party, and not just for a leader. But, Craig, I just feel that our electoral system has become a lot more presidential, and that actually who leads the party matters, Craig, to voters, a lot of voters, perhaps more than you. But listen, I thank you very much for your call. Amir in Birmingham, how are you going to vote?
I'm going to vote Conservative.
Yeah.
And I was calling because I felt like you were being a bit sheepish about voting. I wanted to see what the smart play was in your view, because the way I see it, obviously the Lib Dems are still talking about not triggering Article 50. Labour's eating themselves on the single market.
Mm-hmm.
Conservatives are basically the only party that have somewhat of a plan going in. And I think I trust Theresa May better than I do the other two to actually make a workable deal. So, but I feel like you're being quite. I want to know what the smart play is from your view.
Well, the smart play would be actually, Amir, to have a different electoral system where we had two ballot papers and you could vote for your local MP, but you could vote for a second opinion that you liked. I think electoral reform is massively overdue, but we're not going to get it in 6 weeks' time. Indeed, we're not even going to get the new boundaries that were proposed in 6 weeks' time. I've taken the view all the way through that you should vote for what you really believe in. My family support Crystal Palace not because they think that they're actually going to win the Premier League, although 35 points they may well stay up now. But you back Crystal Palace because that's your team, as opposed to backing teams who you think might win the Premier League this season. So I believe in principle. I have been standing and voting for UKIP for a very, very long time because I thought that best represented my view. We've had people on tonight who say, well, we were UKIP, but we now trust Theresa May to deliver Brexit. I wouldn't be so sure. Jennifer in Birmingham, my last caller of the evening. Jennifer, what are you going to do?
I just, I'm so angry. I've always been a Liberal person, always gone with Labour. The past 2 years, with everything that's gone on, I've come more over to UKIP. I've listened to you more. I listen to Alex Jones. I am really sort of clued up. But I think what Theresa May has done today is an absolute disgrace. And the reason being is she's holding us Brexiters, right, who went out on June the 23rd, turned up, and she's holding us to ransom because she's saying to us, the only way you're going to get Brexit is if you vote Conservative. Now, a lot of us don't like Conservative. We don't like what they've done to the disabled and the sick. Jeremy Corbyn, I call him a wet lettuce.
Jennifer, I'm going to have to stop you there, but I do take your point that Mrs May will sell this in the election as vote for me. I'm the only one that can deliver Brexit. Well, my final thought on all of this today is that the logic for holding this election has been there for months, and yet they didn't do it. They've done it now, frankly, to avoid embarrassment. We hear tonight the news that perhaps up to 30 people could be arrested by the CPS for massive overspending and breaches of electoral law in a general election and by-elections before it. That, I think, is the real reason that they've done it. Mrs May will tell you Brexit means Brexit. Mrs May will tell you if you want it delivered, they're the only party you can possibly vote for. She will win a big majority, and then all the pressure will be off because the Brexit deadline of 2019 will not be followed by a general election just 1 year later, and she'll go soft. That's my view. 6 weeks to go. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show on LBC. I'm back tomorrow from 7. Coming up at 10, it's Ian Collins, but up next, it's Clive Bull.
Thank you, Nigel, and we're going to continue this conversation. It's the one that people didn't really see coming, but we are heading towards another general election. Theresa May says the snap election will bring strong leadership for Britain as we negotiate Brexit. Jeremy Corbyn says he welcomes the news, and Tim Farron is setting out his stall with the Lib Dems as the party against a hard Brexit.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, MPs today, by a massive majority, approved Theresa May's plan to hold this general election on the 8th of June. It's happening. It's game on. Are you excited? Well, a lot of people are. To be fair, though, quite a lot are saying, why are we having yet another election? We seem to be asked to go to the polls every single year. But the question I want to ask tonight is, should Brexit be the deciding factor when it comes to your vote on the 8th of June? Now, the positioning thus far is that Theresa May is making it absolutely clear that she's calling this election because she wants to have a mandate. She says it will strengthen her hand when it comes to negotiating in Brussels. She wants to achieve control of our laws and our borders. Mind you, she said that for 6 years as Home Secretary and didn't really deliver. She will also, of course, add in the point about grammar schools in the Conservative manifesto, something David Cameron would never have countenanced. But the May campaign this is all about Brexit. It's all about giving me a strong hand. As for Labour, well, Jeremy Corbyn, and we saw this today at Prime Minister's Questions, he's going to campaign on austerity. He says there's too much austerity, it's hurting the country. He's going to talk about the crisis in the NHS. He's going to talk about low wages. When it comes to Brexit, I have to say I don't, for the life of me, really know what the Labour Party's position is. So perhaps somebody can ring in and help me with that. The Liberal Democrats, well, Tim Farron is perfectly clear. He says he accepts the result of the referendum, but will do everything he can to keep us as part of the European Union's single market, and he'll fight for a second referendum on the final EU deal. And UKIP, well, UKIP are going to fight this principally on immigration against the Home Secretary, who did not do well on this issue. And they're going to say, we need dramatic cuts to immigration, we need numbers, and they'll challenge the Tory party. Do you still stick to cutting immigration to tens of thousands a year? And UKIP will make the point that if that doesn't happen, then effectively Brexit voters will have been betrayed. So that's where the parties are. But I'm asking you, will Brexit be the deciding factor when you come to vote? And if you think that, yeah, this election is like another referendum, and I'm going to vote on Brexit and to hell with anything else, then call me on 0345 6060 973. If you think that low wages, the NHS, free school meals, if they're your issues, then text at 84850. If, frankly, you're finding it really difficult to muster much enthusiasm for even voting at all in this election, then of course you can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. You can watch the show live on LBC's Facebook page now, and I'll go straight to our first caller, Lee from Bedford. Lee, is this for you a Brexit election? Is it like another referendum? Will it be the biggest issue, biggest factor that decides where you're going to vote?
Well, Nigel, it's going to be half and half.
Right. So half Brexit.
Yep.
And what's the other half for you?
Other things like NHS, education, defence.
Yep.
Foreign aid. Hopefully they'll
Theresa May will scrap the 0.7% that Cameron put in and use it towards the NHS.
Right, so you're leaning towards Theresa May before we even start, are you?
A little bit.
A little bit, right. And, OK, so you're 50-50, so you're really going to treat this like a normal general election, but you would accept that the biggest single factor is Brexit?
Yes.
Fine. Lee, thank you very much indeed. Perfectly clear. Neil in Fulham, is Brexit the issue for you in this election, or do other things really turn you on?
Nigel, I'm first going to say, what a pleasure it is to meet you, and what an amazing thing you've done for our country.
Well, that's very sweet of you, Neil. Thank you.
For 40 years. Thank you very much. No, Theresa May has already set the goalpost. She's defined it as Brexit being the main issue, to give her the power that she needs and the strength behind her to get legislation through. Now, I think UKIP has to find MPs, suitable prospective MPs, to stand against those Ramonas, such as Ken Clarke. Otherwise, people in those areas don't have a choice.
Yeah. OK. Now, I get the point that UKIP needs to focus on the Ramonas, as you call them. But your point, Neil, about Theresa May needs a strong hand to get legislation through, well, she hadn't been stopped from getting any legislation through. I mean, isn't this slightly a myth that we're getting from the Prime Minister, that unless she has a bigger majority, unless she has her own mandate, that somehow the House of Commons and the House of Lords are going to stop her? Because whilst they did frustrate and delay the process by a week or two, the truth is she hasn't lost a single significant vote. Isn't that, Neil, just the excuse she's using to try and take advantage of the fact that Labour are very weak in the polls, and that who knows what the Crown Prosecution Service might do a few weeks or months down the road?
I'm ignoring those side issues as noise, really. The main factor is that she needs to get this legislation through. It's absolutely essential. If there are dissenters in her party, and we know there are, then we have to get rid of them. And this is where UKIP, as I say, must play a pivotal role in putting people up to stand against these Ramonas in these constituencies. If my MP was Ken Clarke and I voted Conservative, status quo. Nothing changes. She needs that. She needs the majority to get these things through, and it's absolutely essential that this happens.
So should she should she, Neil, in your view, sort of purge the Ken Clarkes and people like that?
Well, I would.
You would? OK, Neil, there's a real Brexiteer speaking. Thank you. Ken Clarke, by the way, is standing again. He's been a Member of Parliament since 1970, but he's going to have another go. And whether you agree or disagree with Ken's politics, I have to say he does generally, I think, make the place a bit brighter and a little bit more interesting. But I wonder, you know, when people were asked the question that would you treat this election as another referendum, 67% said no. But I still think it is going to be absolutely the dominant factor. And in many ways, I think it should be the dominant factor in this election. It is, after all, the biggest constitutional change we're going to see in our lifetimes. That's my view. I wonder what Tony in Woodford makes of that.
Hi, Nigel.
Hi.
I just think it's a deception. It's a smokescreen from what's really going on in the country. Look, the people have already voted. We're out, and that's it. Well, I do not agree with what Theresa May has said. You know, she needs to make her hands strong. She can negotiate. She's got 2 years to get things and prepare things. You know, it's just that ordinary people are suffering in this country, and, you know, to turn it into a Brexit kind of, you know, bringing the government back on the Brexit line is, to me, is just an absolute smokescreen.
Well, you know, I mean, she's saying, firstly, she needs a stronger hand to stop her being obstructed in Westminster. But my point is, she has not been obstructed by Westminster at all. She was delayed a little bit, so that clearly isn't the case. Her second argument is this will strengthen her hand in negotiations when she gets over to Brussels to do this. But actually, given that there now won't be a general election until 3 years after the Brexit date, actually, rather than giving her the position where she'll strengthen our negotiations on Brexit, I actually rather suspect, Tony, she might soften it a little bit. And maybe the real smokescreen is that this is somebody running to get a massive majority on paper, as it stands at the minute, as Prime Minister, doing it saying, I'll see Brexit through, I'll get back control of our borders, but in reality, will do much the same as she did as Home Secretary and deliver almost none of it. Or, Tony, am I too cynical?
No, I think you're absolutely spot on, but I would not underestimate or write off Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, everyone thought Donald Trump was a complete joke, would never get anywhere, and look what happened. If Corbyn can get momentum and bring up about, what's happening in the country, the state of the NHS, and really, really keep playing that card, I think he could come through. I really believe it.
That's fine, Tony, but at least Donald Trump could do his tie up straight, which Mr. Corbyn seems to be wholly incapable of. And you might say to me, why does that matter? Actually, it does. And the other point about Trump is his messaging was absolutely clear. You knew where he stood on every issue. Whether you found his views tough to stomach or not is not the point. You knew where he stood. And I asked the question at the start of this programme, can somebody help me, please? Someone tell me what the Labour Party's real position is on Brexit, given that I think it is the dominant issue, and I'll find out in the next 45 minutes how many agree with that. I don't know, Tony, what his policy is on the biggest issue of the day. I think he's got no chance.
Well, I'm a bit unsure, but look, he's got 7 weeks to get something together and to prove that he is ready and is going to be at least an effective opposition up until it's decided, whether the Tories are back in or not. So, I just think we should see what happens.
Tony, you're quite right, because, if this time last year we'd said that Leicester City were going to win the Premiership, Trump was going to become the US president, Brexit would happen, and the Italian Prime Minister would lose a referendum and have to resign, we would have been thought absolutely bonkers. And you're right. In the course of the next 6.5 weeks, there could be huge surprises. But I think for this election to have even an element of unpredictability, Theresa May would have to do something dramatically and stupidly bad and wrong. And I, Tony, just don't see it. But I take your point, and like a lot of callers, Tony actually sees quite a lot of good in Jeremy Corbyn, thinks he's very sincere. We had calls on that last night. Mohammed in Aberystwyth. Tell me, Mohammed, is Brexit going to be the dominant issue?
I think, Nigel, is definitely going to be the dominant issue. However, I think the elections, they might have been a bit poorly planned. I'm a Conservative myself.
Yep.
However, I don't think this was a good time to put the elections in because, the country's just gone through Brexit. We just had Article 50 being triggered, etc.
Yep.
And I think we need more time. And now, I think the real winners of this election is going to be the SNP and the Liberal Democrats. Now, think about it for a minute. You can call it an unholy alliance if you want, the SNP, Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party against the Conservative Party. You know yourself that, for the last 25 years, you worked really hard to get Britain out of Europe. And the likes of the Liberal Democrats and the likes of the people in the Labour Party and even in the SNP will block you. And that will give Britain an extremely weak hand at, negotiating with Europe. I mean, Europe is weak itself. But if Theresa May was to win with, an increased majority, we could go in there as such with guns blazing and, argue from a position of strength. But I can't see it happening. I'm not sure what's going to happen.
But barring Mohammed, barring her losing her majority, and I talked last night extensively about the Crown Prosecution Service and possibly 30 people going to face charges, barring that, she hadn't lost any votes in Westminster. There was no prospect, Mohammed, of her losing any votes in Westminster. I'm not sure. I like the idea of a general election coming up shortly after the Brexit process finished. I feel an extra 3 years has bought her time. Mohammed, my fear is we finish up with transitional arrangements and goodness knows what else. But I thank you for your point. Right now, you're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:15. Nick. It's happening. Parliament approves the Prime Minister's plans. We are having a general election. It's happening on June the 8th, whether you like it or not. And I'm asking you, should Brexit be the deciding factor when it comes to your vote? I'm also asking you, can you be bothered to vote? Do you feel you've been asked enough? Do you feel, actually, given that they've got a 20-point lead in the polls, the Tories are going to win anyway, so what's the point of any of it? Now, I always ask you to send in texts and tweets and Facebook messages. Says any fair, I read them out. Jack says, UKIP has run its course. No real option other than the Tories, unfortunately. Well, we'll see about that, Jack. Paul says we need a strong government to deliver Brexit. Max says the danger will come from Ramona's voting Lib Dem. And I asked earlier, could somebody help me, please? Somebody tell me what the Labour Party's position on Brexit is, because I'm confused. Maud Imbued helps me by saying, Nigel, in strictest confidence, Labour's position is difficult. Yes, Maud, thank you very much indeed for that. Richard Simcox tweets in and says, Nigel, you stood down too early. Big mistake. You need to get back in the fight quickly. Thanks, mate. Really helpful. I get two main issues, immigration and police funding, both of which she performed very badly at for 6 years, says OJ. And I get the last one I'm going to read out now is, Nigel, this is an exciting, great opportunity for the country to show Labour it's finished. Also to show Sturgeon that the majority of Scots are unhappy with Indy Ref 2, Andy from Falkirk. Laura in Wakefield, good evening. Is Brexit going to be the big deciding issue for you? Can you be bothered to vote at all, Laura?
I would never say I can't be bothered to vote because I believe it's too important that we've got that right. So I'm considering going to the polls and spoiling my ballot.
Are you? Tell me why.
Well, because, people always complain that there isn't a none of the above option. And I think it's important that I do go and use my democratic right. But to be honest, I've been politically active from the age of about 15 or 16. I voted Conservative for my entire adult life till the last election when I voted UKIP because I met the local UKIP candidate while campaigning for the referendum, and I thought he's a really sound guy. I really like him, and I'm going to vote for him. And if he was an independent, I would probably vote for him. But I just think that this election is going to be run like a referendum, and the referendum was run like a general election. I mean, how many times are we getting on the debates? How many times are we getting, what's it going to look like? What are the policies? It's not a general election. They didn't need to put forward policies. They needed to put forward arguments for or against being in the EU.
Yep.
So now we're going to get something where they should be putting forward policies on how to run the country, which is going to be arguments about for or against being in the EU, which seems mad to me.
Well, Laura, they will all issue manifestos, and it's pretty clear from Labour's line of attack that they, and it could be their own embarrassment because they're split on the issue, but, I mean, make no bones about it, that Corbyn is going to try very, very hard to talk about putting VAT on private school fees. He's going to start talking about the crisis in the NHS, about low wages. So, that, there will be debate on other issues too, Laura.
Yeah, and I just think they're going to get pushed aside, and it's going to... There's too much of a slickness about British politics, which is what people were expecting in the referendum, when actually the thing that won out was the grassroots arguments, the arguments from real people saying, actually, this is what's going to affect me. You went on the flotilla on the Thames. Well, my husband is from he's from North Shields, which was featured in Brexit the movie. That issue of fishing really affected our family. Well, it doesn't personally affect it, but we felt very affected by it because he's literally seen the community that he grew up in just
all right, Laura. Well, there's an issue then. Surely you should ask your candidates who are going to be standing in Wakefield, do they want to take back Britain's 200-mile territorial fishing limits? That'll be something for you to vote for or against, wouldn't it?
Yes, but then again, we go back to this is about the EU referendum. It's not about that in the next 5 years, and that will be an issue. But actually, that issue should have been dealt with within the referendum.
I can't change the past, Laura. I can't, and I can't change the present either. but at some point, you're going to have to decide what to do. I don't think somebody that's been politically active, like you, since they were 15 or 16, is going to go along and spoil a paper. I think you'd feel guilty and bad about doing it. But I thank you very much indeed for your call. Nathaniel in Dover, is Brexit going to dominate?
Hi, Nigel. Not for me. I think the government are going to manipulate people into making the Brexit about the problem, about the election, rather than the more important issues about what's affecting people next door to them or what's affecting people just up the road from them, because there's no point going through the negotiations if we haven't got a country what's got strong infrastructure to prepare to adapt and to change to what people voted in the Brexit negotiations. We don't even know what it's going to look like yet. So for them to do that, I think is just pure manipulation and is deviating from the real issues in this country, I think, personally, like poverty, homelessness, that sort of thing.
Well, she certainly set out... She set out her stall. She set the whole thing around Brexit, hasn't she? I mean, that's absolutely true. I mean, there will be more to come in the in the manifesto. But presumably, Nathaniel, in Dover, an issue like immigration must be absolutely at the top of people's concerns.
Yeah, it is, and you're not wrong. But I think that's a separate issue from Brexit. Obviously, you've got the freedom of movement, but I think that is aside, because you've also got to encourage people who are already here. You need to try and encourage the communities actually to get on a little bit, rather than, looking at that person and thinking, oh, I don't like him, I don't understand him. Rather than that, I think it's more important to look at them and go, okay, we're here, we're working together, now how can we actually improve the area together?
What is the one thing, Nathaniel, that really, above all, what is the one thing that'll make you decide which way to vote?
What will make me decide to vote is just how people are going to look after those at the bottom of the ladder. You know what I mean? Those who are struggling, those who've got nothing. That's the thing I'm going to look towards.
So you're looking at jobs, benefits, etc.
Housing. That sort of thing.
Yep. OK, Nathaniel, thank you. So Nathaniel viewing this very much, indeed, as a traditional general election, I would say. Anna in Doncaster, is Brexit...
Hello, Nigel.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. It's a pleasure to speak to you. Can I just say we've got a local election before the general election. I don't just want to swerve off the issue. And I would urge everyone who's got a local election coming up to vote UKIP.
No. Anna, we don't do party political broadcasts here. No, we simply can't. Now, your messages still coming in. Over the last few months, you've been saying she should call an election. Now you're saying she's buying time. Bit confused. No, I've said for the last 6 months that I thought she should call an election. It made sense. It would legitimise her. It would give her a chance to go out and do the Brexit job properly. My concern is that she called it now at a time when it's become clear to me in the last few weeks that actually her position is softening on a whole load of things, such as she doesn't want to take back our fishing waters. She's happy for the European Court of Justice to continue to have say over this country. So I'm worried now that actually this election isn't about having a hard Brexit, it's about getting a soft Brexit. We'll see. Derek on Facebook says, I shall be supporting an anti-Brexit party such as the Lib Dems, previously a Conservative voter. Derek, you're not alone. I don't think there are vast numbers of you, but you're not alone. Anne says, I voted UKIP last time, but I'm going Tory just to make sure Labour doesn't win. And I get that, but you might find in 5 or 6 weekends' time that the gap between the two is so big. This could be the first election, for 30 years in which we know the result before we even go to vote. Richard says the Lib Dems will not be able to stop Brexit like people seem to think. I'm sure, Richard, that is absolutely true. I'm going to go to Sue in Cheam. Sue, what is going to make your mind up as to how to vote in this election?
Well, Nigel, thank you for taking my call. I'm confused of Cheam at the moment. I phoned up yesterday to LBC when I heard Theresa May's speech to say that I was definitely going to vote Tory after years of blocking them, trying to block them in Cheam by voting a Lib Dem. But at the same time, now I've thought I was going to vote for Theresa May. I'm hearing a whole load of stuff that we're not being told, and this is why I'm calling you, because you're the one person I feel who will actually speak the truth, and I want to know what is her hidden agenda, because I'm a bit scared about what she might do to all the issues you just mentioned, the fishing, the health service is one of the big ones that we're all worried about. There's a whole load of stuff. She's surfing on the Brexit thing, but I want to know what she's really about.
I mean, Sue, if she gets a massive majority, there are some commentators suggesting that if you look at the numbers, that could become a 140-seat majority, let's say. By doing that, she actually neutralises the really hard-line Eurosceptics in her own party. She was a Remainer. She is very much a career politician. How many times did she tell us there wasn't going to be an election and now there is one? And I guess, Sue, that's my concern, is that she's really wrapping herself in the Brexit message as far as this campaign's concerned.
Yeah, but Nigel...
But I'm worried.
One thing that I recall was that when, from previous jobs that she's done, she always seemed to be the one person that everybody turned on. They wanted to get rid of her so many times, as far as my perception is, that they didn't reckon her at all about any of the jobs that she held. And now, I thought she'd turned everything around and come good with this Brexit and all the rest of it. But now I'm beginning to wonder if she's really a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Well, Sue, I could be wrong with my concerns. Maybe the Prime Minister is an absolute total, genuine convert to the Brexit cause and Brexit message? If that's the case, why have I heard all these worrying signals over the course of the last few weeks? Sue, confused of Cheam, I thank you for your call. If there's anything that you want to hear, that you've heard already, that you would disagree with, then don't be frightened to pick up the phone and come and have a go. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30 and time for the news with Rupert Bartier.
The Prime Minister has...
We've got a general election coming, whether you like it or not, whether you're motivated by Brexit as the main issue, or perhaps other things, or maybe you're one of those people who simply thinks we shouldn't be being asked to vote again. I have to say, the one prediction I will make is that the turnout in this election will be significantly lower than it was for the referendum last year. I'm pretty certain of that. And, of course, people coming and going. So Alan Johnson, Labour, has decided to retire. Gisela Stewart, Labour, one of the few handful of Brexit Labour MPs, she's standing down. Ken Clarke, as I've said already, is going again. But the one that pleases me on a personal level is our pasty-faced former Chancellor, George Osborne, is to quit as MP for Tatton at the next election. I'm pleased about that because I didn't think he behaved very well during the Brexit campaign. But something else that's interesting. Back in the early 60s, the Americans started the idea of presidential television debates, and those that study this will know that it was Kennedy versus Nixon, and the criticism was that Kennedy looked cool and Nixon looked a bit podgy and a bit sweaty and could have done with a shave beforehand. But ever since that election, debates have been a massive thing in American presidential campaigns, and I, in fact, attended some of them that took place between Trump and Clinton. And we've kind of got used to them in this country because we had them in 2010, we had them in 2015, and indeed, the first one that I really took part in was Nick Ferrari hosted a debate between me and the then Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg in the run-up to the European elections of that year. I have to say, going onto that stage against the Deputy Prime Minister was probably, at that moment in time, the most nerve-wracking experience of my life. That's until I took part in the leaders' debates in 2015 in the general election, and they are very nerve-wracking. And, yeah, sometimes people play safe, sometimes they don't, but I think it is actually, I believe, it's a bit more than just theatre. I think under real pressure, you see what people are genuinely like. And I think we now have an expectation and a desire that leaders' debate should happen in this country. My only criticism of last time is there were simply too many parties represented. One of them who was represented had got fewer than 200,000 votes in the previous general election. And, you know, if you live in North Wales, Plaid Cymru might be an important party, but it's not actually for the whole of the United Kingdom. Interesting, isn't it, that Downing Street are absolutely outright rejecting the idea that Theresa May will take part in leaders' debates. They did it yesterday. Now, there is a Sky poll out today showing that 64% of people believe there should be televised debates between the party leaders, with 30% or so opposed. So a big majority want to see these debates. I wonder, of the 30% opposed, how many of those actually are non-voters and just hate politics completely? I would bet you, of prospective voters, it's much higher than just 64% that want to see these contests. So Theresa May's not going to do them. Well, I think she's in for a bit of a surprise. I think ITV will just go ahead with the debate and empty chair her. And I saw Dimbleby, David Dimbleby, who has been around doing debates for a few years for the BBC, virtually saying the same thing. I think the leaders' debates are going to happen with or without Theresa May, and I think it would damage her credibility not to be a part of it. And I think, to be honest with you, the public would feel diddled if the Prime Minister, who had called this election, to much to the surprise of everybody, was not prepared to go head-to-head, especially against Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of Her Majesty's opposition. Well, at least for now. Anyway, but back to the main question. I'm going to Matthew in Leicester. Will Brexit, Matthew, dominate your thinking when it comes to your vote on June 8th?
No, in a short answer.
Fair enough.
But yes. To be honest with you, I'm in a massive quandary at the moment. And the biggest quandary I've got is I am a fully signed-up member of the Red Club. I am a Labour man through and through, always have been, and I genuinely do not feel that I can vote Labour this time round. At a local level, I don't feel that my local MP, who is also a Labour man, really has our interests at heart. And I'm not going to name him, but I think his recent press things over the last year probably show that.
I think I might know the chap you're talking about, yeah. Was it let's get this party started, is that right?
Yeah, let's go along with that.
Yeah, for those listeners that know what I'm talking about, you can smile along. For those that don't, I'm not going to go there. But Matthew,
tongue in cheek.
But I mean, ignoring perhaps his own circumstances, what is wrong with your Labour Party? Tell me.
Okay, so I don't think there is any clear leadership in any direction at the moment. It's pulling itself apart. And from the meetings that I have attended, there is a lot of unrest. Everyone within the party genuinely believes that come the 9th of June, Jeremy Corbyn will be resigning. And, you know, from the general feedback that I'm getting, you know, with the work that I do, I think it could be a close election, but not necessarily in the way that people think it's going to go. You know, the SNP, I think they're going to lose quite a few MPs because I know Scotland are very, very uneasy at the moment.
Yeah.
So that could be very interesting how that turns out. The Lib Dems, yeah, okay.
They'll bounce a bit, won't they?
Yeah,
I mean, they will bounce a bit.
They are going to bounce up a little bit.
But Matthew, please,
are going to have their say.
Matthew, I've asked 2 or 3 times tonight already, and perhaps you as a paid-up Labour man can help me. Please, somebody explain to me, maybe you can do it, what is Corbyn's policy on Brexit at this election?
As a fully paid-up Labour man, I wish I had the answer. However, the general gist of it is, and you know, from what I know, and I may be speaking out of turn here, but I doubt it very much so, is that the Labour Party are not going into this election having Brexit as their main point of view.
Sure, I get that. I get that. And I saw that today. Matthew, at the dispatch box. But, I mean, you know, we've got callers ringing in saying Brexit's not the major issue for them and others saying that it is. Clearly, it will be the dominant issue in this election. And for the leader of the opposition, for us to simply not know, surely is a disastrous place to start.
I think it's a very bad move, and I think his whole stance on the Brexit was a very, very bad stance, and that's automatically got him on the back foot. Yeah. He hasn't bounced back, and he hasn't actually said, do you know what, right, let's get on with it. We are doing Brexit. This is the way we're going to go.
Matthew, tell me this. How much trouble is Labour in?
I think I might be stopping my direct debit soon.
Fair enough. Matthew, thank you very much indeed for your call. And if the opinion polls are to be believed, there are a lot of people like Matthew out there. Stephen in Maidstone, how are you going to vote and why? Will Brexit dominate it? Good evening.
Brexit will dominate it to a point. I think the future direction of the United Kingdom and the obviously negotiations around Brexit are going to shape our country for decades to come. And I think it would be foolish for anybody to come forward and try to argue otherwise. Nigel, I'll be voting for Theresa May at the general election. Reason being, I was previously a supporter of yourself and UKIP. But I feel that the Conservatives have very cunningly taken a lot of strong and decent UKIP policies, particularly around grammar schools, which I'm a strong advocate of. And I think that Theresa May, I'd like to say, on behalf of the whole entire Conservative Party, thank you very much for Jeremy Corbyn. We're looking forward to the general election. We're looking forward to a romping landslide majority. Looking like it'll be in the region of upwards of 140 seats.
Sure.
So good news on that front.
I mean, Stephen, your basic point. I've listened to some of those speeches that Theresa May's given over the course of the last 6 or 8 months, and I thought, goodness me, that's exactly what I've been saying for the last 20 years, and often been slagged off for. But I wonder, Stephen, does she actually, really, genuinely mean it?
Nigel, I do genuinely think that she means it. I do. I think that she's, you mentioned to previous callers, where Theresa May's not had any issues in getting, what she wants through Parliament today. But we don't know what's not on the agenda today that could be on the agenda tomorrow. There's going to be a number of things that she wants to pass through Parliament that she isn't willing to bring to the table at the current moment.
Stephen, she's convinced you, and you've made that very clear. You see her as a very sincere person. I thank you for the call. And a text here, Nigel, this second referendum, as he sees it, is breaking my heart, as after 40 years of voting for Labour, I'm going to have to vote Tory to ensure Brexit continues. Lee from Kent. Lee, it may well be people like you up and down this country, and I suspect particularly in the Midlands and the north of England, that actually determine just how big Theresa May's majority is going to be. Right now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC. It's 7:45.
This is LBC.
Hi. This is the Nigel Farage Show on LBC, and I'm asking you, should Brexit be the deciding factor when it comes to your vote in this election that is happening on June the 8th? And on Facebook, Maha says, Corbyn, the only genuine politician out there. Yeah, there are people that believe that. Dan asks me, will you stand as an independent? Why? Won't anybody else have me? Zane says, do you think the young person vote will be a deciding factor? No, Zane, they'll stay at home. And then, when they don't like the result, they'll protest in Parliament Square. We saw all of that last year. I'm going to ask Carol. Carol in Sleaford, Lincolnshire. You're on LBC. Carol, tell me, what is going to dominate your thinking in terms of your vote?
Good evening, Nigel. It's going to be 100% Brexit.
Yep.
I've been a Brexiteer for 40 years.
Right.
And thank you so much for everything you did. I voted UKIP in our local by-election.
Yep.
I voted UKIP in the Europeans. I will be voting for Theresa May. I'll be holding my nose and voting for Theresa May because I think, looking at it, we need to keep out Tim Farron, the SNP, and Corbyn. So it's a tactical... Well, it makes no difference in my constituency. But the point I wanted to make was, I think UKIP have a massive role to play in this because they need to target very clearly where they're going to go.
Yep.
And not to go and let Labour into Tory seats or Lib Dems in.
Carol, I don't think... I mean, come on, be honest. The UKIP vote in 2015 in the general election hurt Labour. I very much doubt, in fact, I'm certain there would not have been a Tory majority had it not been for the impact of the Labour vote. So I'm not worried about that, Carol. What I am interested in, and yeah, you're right, where UKIP targets its resources, it's going to need to be selective about that. But the thing that interests me is that what Theresa May has been selling over the course of the last few days is if you don't vote for me, there'll be this beastly coalition of people against me who will stop Brexit from happening. And it clearly, that messaging is sinking in. Numerically, Carol, unless there is the most dramatic change in the polls we've seen in any of our lifetimes, she is going to win a very big majority, whatever happens.
Well, I hope she does, and I hope she delivers. And don't forget, if she doesn't, we'll hold her accountable.
Absolutely right. And Carol, it's nice to talk to somebody who's been a Brexiteer for even longer than I have, and I thank you. I'm going to ask Howell in Bangor, what is going to make your mind up in this general election? Is it Brexit or is it something else?
It'll be mostly Brexit, Nigel.
Yes. OK, and how do you... I mean, were you a Remainer, a Leaver?
I was a Remainer.
Yep.
As such, I can't side with Corbyn because he's pushing through hard Brexit. He's being pretty supine on the issue.
Well, yeah, I'm going to say, isn't the point how we don't really know where he stands on the issue, do we?
Well, he allowed the triggering of Article 50, which doesn't obviously set out exactly how Brexit will work, but it's following the general tenor of what Theresa May has been saying. He's just kind of gone along with it.
But as a Remainer, yes. The result was the result. Article 50 had to be triggered at some point, didn't it?
I think a proper discussion and a proper referendum deal that wasn't cheapened by stunts like such as yourself should have been run again in another referendum before we triggered Article 50.
Well, we could argue that. We could argue that every general election things were said on both sides that weren't right, couldn't we?
Yes, that's true. I think it's particularly venomous in the case of the referendum, and particularly poisonous.
Well, I'm afraid that it was. At least I thought it was until I went to America and saw the battle between Clinton and Trump, which was even more vicious and venomous and unpleasant. And perhaps that's just the world we're living in now with social media and everything else. But tell me, as somebody, I mean, you're clearly an absolutely staunch Remainer. So how does that manifest itself in this election on the 8th of June?
Well, to be honest with you, what I'm wondering is people are prophesying the breakup of the EU anyway within the next few years. And I'm just wondering, could we not have brought this about in a more multilateral, negotiated way rather than pitch ourselves into sort of wild uncertainty that we have now? I know you're going to argue the economy hasn't tanked or what have you, or at least I think you're going to say that, but the pound is, of course, falling. And
Good. I want the pound down, absolutely. I want the pound down. But Hal, I'm not rerunning the referendum. I'm asking you, as a Remainer...
I think you'll find this will be done in this election.
But I'm asking you, as a Remainer, do you just stay at home on June the 8th, or do you feel as a Remainer you can influence this by voting for somebody?
Well, I know the local Plaid Cymru candidates, and I believe what they stand for. And Wales needs to batten down hatches extraordinarily against this being cut adrift by Westminster, which is inevitably going to happen. So I'll be going with Plaid Cymru most likely. OK. Hal, I thank you very much for your call. Hal, who sounds very down about the referendum and everything that's happened ever since, but, for every one of him, there's quite a few people who are feeling quite chirpy and jolly. I wonder whether that applies to Jessica in Woking. Good evening, Jessica.
Oh, hello.
Hi there. So how are you going to vote and why, Jessica?
Well, I don't really discuss how I'm going to vote, but I've just wanted to bring up that maybe Brexit isn't the determining factor for everyone. When you're a public sector worker, you're feeling the full effect of a Conservative government at the moment, and actually that's probably going to have the biggest effect on all the public sector votes. So we're all under strain, and it's going to make people vote other ways.
Well, it may do. I mean, it's very interesting that Jeremy Corbyn was talking about this today at the dispatch box in Prime Minister's Questions, and clearly he wants it to be an issue in the campaign. And he's basically saying that austerity has failed, that because of austerity, public sector workers in particular are not earning what they'd like to earn. The difficulty with that argument, Jessica, is how on earth can you call it austerity when, since the Tories took over, firstly a coalition, now their own government, the national debt has more than doubled. So we're not actually living in austerity at all. We're actually living beyond our means anyway.
Yeah, but what you're forgetting is that the public sector workers don't go into the public sector for money. It's not the wages that are on everyone's mind. It's their ability to do the job. I know of teachers without books for children to write in. It's the national debt. I don't know what it's being spent on. It's not going into the places it needs to be put. Well,
one of the problems, Jessica, is the population has risen so sharply that when it comes to schools and hospitals and all the rest of it, there are simply a lot more people in need of that service. I mean, Jessica, how do you... I mean, OK, you don't want to go into specific, but, do you feel, as a public sector worker, that this government is giving you a rotten deal?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Jessica. You've made your point, and it's people like you that Jeremy Corbyn will be talking to over the course of the next 6 weeks. Of that, there is no doubt at all. Tom in Greenwich, is Brexit going to determine your vote?
Yeah, my opinion is on Jeremy Corbyn. We're missing the point here.
Yep.
The guy was on Cameron's side with Brexit. You keep mentioning genuine. Genuine keeps coming up. We're thinking of Jeremy Corbyn when we're talking about genuine. We can see that he wants the best for the NHS. He wants the best for our teachers, the schools. He doesn't want to show up and come up in a nice suit and try and display, his trade. He wants the best for us. You come back to genuine with Theresa May.
Well,
I like to believe she's got a lovely smile, but...
Tom, I get your point. And there are people, and I've tried to be as fair as I can in reading out their messages and taking the calls. There are people who think that Jeremy Corbyn is a very genuine, decent guy. The trouble is, Tom, for 33 years, every single time there was a vote in the House of Commons on the European Community and then European Union and European treaties, he voted against it every single time, and then in the referendum, in a lukewarm way, backed Remain. Is that a genuine politician, Tom?
Well, things change, Nigel. It wasn't always. Yeah,
well, do you know what? Actually, at the end of the day, they're all career politicians, aren't they? Tom, I thank you very much. I thank all of you for your messages and calls. I've got through as many as I possibly could over the course of the last hour. And my final thought on this question of should Brexit be the deciding factor in this general election, it has to be. It's got to be. Because it affects absolutely everything. It affects the numbers of people coming into Britain. It affects what trade deals we're going to do with the rest of the world. It affects the legislation on small companies, on everything else. And it is the biggest constitutional question we've been asked to vote on in our lifetimes. To me, the question is Theresa May absolutely a genuine convert to the Brexit cause, or is she just playing a game of political advantage? We'll be discussing this over the course of the next few weeks. You've been listening to The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. I'm back tomorrow evening from 7. Coming up at 10, it's Ian Collins. But up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you. And up at 9 o'clock, it's your chance for some free legal advice. Barrister Daniel Barnett.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, the general election is on, and I know over the last few evenings, a lot of people have been asking me, what am I going to do? Am I going to stand? Am I not going to stand? Am I going to go back for the Thanet South constituency? What am I going to do? And I have to say, today, I was plunged into even deeper difficulty in terms of my thought process when I heard that Clacton-on-Sea is now a Douglas Carswell-free zone, which I think in terms of political honesty is a very good thing. Clacton is demographically UKIP's best seat in the country. And I thought, well, do you know what? I could stand in Thanet South. It's tough, but I still think I'd win, given an even playing field. If I stood in Clacton, it'd be easier. But then I thought to myself, why am I in politics? Why did I leave quite a good job, running my own company, working in the metals trading industry? Why did I get involved in this rat's nest that is called politics? And I did it because I always had a very strong conviction. I always believed that the direction of this country was wrong in terms of being part of European political union. So I stood in elections, I stood in by-elections, I stood in European elections, I nearly stood in the 90s in as many elections as Screaming Lord Sutch, the late Screaming Lord Sutch of the monster raving loony party. But I did it out of absolute total conviction, never wanting to be a career politician. Well, things moved on and we won the European elections of 2014. We forced Cameron to concede a referendum and we won it. And we've won the war. The question is, how do we win the peace, which is equally important? And how can I play my role helping Brexit to happen? So I've been weighing up for the last couple of days, what best do I do? Would it be right to fight and win a constituency and sit on the back benches in Westminster? Or do I think about the fact that I already have a position as leader of a group in the European Parliament? I'm the only one out of 508 million people sitting on that front bench who is opposed to the whole concept of European Union, where not only can I get up and make speeches and criticise either what they're doing or indeed what the British government is doing in the negotiations that will take place there over the course of the next 2 years, but I've also got a big profile on the big stage with media, European media, across all 28 member states. And given that it's the European Parliament, not the British Parliament, but the European Parliament that ultimately, at the end of this 2-year process, will have the absolute right of veto, I thought to myself, sitting as a backbench MP, being called by John Bercow twice a year for PMQs, or having a chance once or twice every month to be on the front row, to be up close and personal with Jean-Claude Juncker, Donald Tusk and all the rest of them. In terms of a stage, there's no comparison. And in terms of Brexit, what I want to do is I want to make sure that in February, March 2019, as the Brexit deadline approaches and as the European Parliament gets its final vote, I want to make sure those MEPs, have the maximum pressure exerted upon them by their own constituents. And I'm talking about German car manufacturers. I'm talking about French wine producers. I'm talking about Belgian chocolate makers, people who sell so much more to Britain than we sell to them. They actually call us Treasure Island. We are their best export market in the world. And I believe that by using my, what some may say fame, others may say notoriety, it doesn't really matter, but I've got a chance to travel around those big European cities and to say to people, don't vote, don't support MEPs who are standing for re-election, who will block Britain having a sensible free trade deal exit, because if you do that, you'll cost people jobs in those constituencies far more than you'll ever hurt people in the UK. So for all of those reasons, I've decided I will not stand in this general election, but I will stand absolutely foursquare behind Paul Nuttall, behind UKIP, and I think it's very interesting. The last couple of nights, callers saying, I've got to vote for Theresa May because, thing is, if she doesn't win, there's going to be this progressive alliance of Labour, the Lib Dems and the SNP who will form the government and reverse Brexit. I have a feeling that over the course of the next few weeks, you're going to see the Tory poll lead so huge that actually the idea that anyone can win, other than the Conservatives, will be out of the window. And I think in that situation, a lot of voters will come home to UKIP. That's my view. I am happy to take any calls, any comments on what I've done. You may think I've done the right thing. You may think I've done the wrong thing. But let me know. Call me on 0345 60 60 973. You can text at 84850. You can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. And you can watch us live on LBC's Facebook page. Now, that's me. But more important than me is Jeremy Corbyn, who today launched the Labour manifesto. It was a very strong anti-establishment message. It was, I am on your side. I'm against the big battalions who have really carved up the economy and this country for their own benefit, and I'm with you. It was, I suppose, perhaps the most left-wing manifesto that has been seen since Michael Foot back in 1983. But he was talking about fairness. He was talking about being on the side of ordinary people against the rich, against the wealthy, against the big businesses. And I know from this programme that there are many of you out there that think the man is very genuine and very sincere in what he says. But there is, I think, a little bit of a problem. One, and you may think this is ridiculous, but last night I sort of half joked. I said, the trouble with Corbyn is he can't actually do his tie up straight. Did you see him today? Did you see him at the launch? The tie was sort of round here somewhere. I mean, it looked to me to be a shambles. Perhaps I'm old-fashioned. Perhaps I'm completely out of date. But that's how it looked to me. But the bigger problem is that on Brexit, on the attitudes towards Brexit, which without any shadow of a doubt is the dominant issue in this general election campaign, he was, frankly, all over the place. He said in his speech, he point-blank refused to rule out asking for a second referendum on the ultimate Brexit deal. And then later in the day, John McDonnell said that the government should put the deal to Parliament and possibly to the country overall. So it looked like at lunchtime the Labour Party were backing a second referendum, and yet within a few hours it was perfectly clear that they were ruling out backing a second referendum. And I think that on the biggest issue that faces voters in this general election, what this launch today has shown is that, frankly, the Labour Party is a shambles. And I said last night, can anyone please ring in and tell me what Labour's policy is on Brexit? And after today's launch, I'm even more confused. Anyone out there that knows where Labour really stands on this key issue in this election, call me. So the question I'm asking you is, do you believe that Labour is a credible threat in this general election? Call me 0345 60 60 973, text 84850, tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. I'm going to go to Paul in Deal in Kent. Deal, of course, a constituency, Paul, that has been Labour, has been Tory, has been Labour, a real marginal.
Absolutely. But one thing I've got to say straight away, Nigel. First of all, nice to speak to you. But secondly, I hear the passion and the enthusiasm in your voice, and I think you're wrong by not standing. We need you. You're the only one that's got the balls to stand up to the establishment and make sure this happens. And I think you should stand and make sure that this carries on through. And because you need to help me. You need to help me and the many others like me who are going to be on the fence. I used to support Labour, but now they've got that weasel of a scarecrow running it. I can't stand it, so I'm out of it. I'm not a Tory, and I voted UKIP last time.
Right.
So now what do? I think UKIP hasn't got much running ground anymore without you being in there. Labour, I can't stand. The others, the Lib Dems and the Greens, who the hell are they? And, well, the Conservatives are going to win it, but I don't agree with their manifesto. And I'm not alone.
No, Paul, I know you're not.
So I can support you.
Yeah, but Paul, as I said a moment ago, I got into politics not for a career. I left a career to come into this malarkey, and I have to think to myself, how best can I serve Brexit? We won the war, we have to win the peace, and I genuinely think I can do that better leading a group of 45 MEPs in the European Parliament where the negotiations will take place and where ultimately they could veto 2 years of hard work. That, Paul, is why I've made this decision. But I do get that you will not be alone in being disappointed or criticising me for not doing this. But I've done it because I genuinely think I can do more for Brexit leading a group in the European Parliament than I can as a backbench MP who probably would get pretty ignored, Paul.
But I'm getting to the feeling now, personally, after listening to the news and reading bits and paper, I think, and I'm 49, I'm a grown-up man, I'm going to have to vote Tory purely to give my country the support it needs. Not because I agree with its mandate or its policies or I agree with the Conservatives, because I don't. But I feel now I have to vote for them to give Theresa May the backing that she needs to be strong and powerful to get Brexit through. Because I don't care what anybody says. This election is all about Brexit.
Oh, Paul, listen, I agree with that, mate. Absolutely. I mean, I would say this to you. If you're a strong Brexiteer, you've got two choices, haven't you? Because you can't vote Labour because they haven't got a policy. You can't vote Lib Dem because they're pro-Remain and second referendums. And you've either got to vote for the Conservatives, trusting Theresa May, or you've got to vote UKIP, thinking that actually the Tories need to be held to account. And I simply can't see what else as a Brexiteer you can do. But it's an unusual election, Paul. It's a weird election. The only thing I'm completely confident of is the Conservatives are going to win this election with an absolutely massive majority. But, I mean, if anybody out there who's a Brexit voter thinks I'm wrong and thinks they're going to vote for somebody else, let me know. Paul, in delightful Deal in Kent, where I was last Friday. Thank you very much indeed for your call. I'm going to go to Sigra in Nottingham. Good evening.
Good evening, but it's Syra.
Syra, I apologise. Now tell me, do you think Labour pose a credible threat in this election campaign given their launch today?
Absolutely. There's no reason why Labour will not win, because half of the Conservatives, they're under investigation for fraud anyway. So, however, if there was going to be a possibility for Conservatives to win, that is certainly not going to happen. Well,
look, Sarah, it isn't half of them, and I made this point on Tuesday on this show that perhaps up to 20 MPs and constituencies are under investigation, and the Crown Prosecution Service have said that up to 30 people, including 20 MPs, may well. They may not, but they may well face prosecution. So it isn't half of them. And in a way, I think what Theresa May has done by calling this election, partly because she feared a slew of by-elections, but also she wanted to draw a line under the old Conservative Party run by Cameron Osborne to say we're now running a clean campaign. I don't think that's going to hurt them here, do you?
I completely disagree. I believe the reason why she's called for a slap election is because she knows she's going to lose. One, there's no way she's going to get a good deal. Nobody actually likes her in the EU. She will never be able to get a good deal for us. Secondly, I'm sure she's part of the investigation. Well, if she certainly isn't now, she definitely will be, because I'm positive she's got her hand in it. But regardless of that, what I found comical, and the reason I'm actually ringing up, is that you've actually put quite a statement on there saying that I've decided not to take part in the general election. my question to you is, why would we vote for you even? What you did during Brexit, the lies, the 350 million, we're still waiting on that.
Well, but hang on, I never mentioned that.
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't.
Times you did.
Never, not once.
You deny it.
No, do you know what? I do deny it. I never mentioned it once. Don't put words into my mouth that are false.
There were posters by your party.
There weren't.
Absolutely everywhere. There were posters of refugees from Middle East, which had nothing to do with Brexit. You used a nasty campaign that you led. You're talking about we won the war, let's win the peace.
Yeah.
With the stuff that you've done, do you really think that you can sit there and dictate?
You do sound like a very, very sore loser, and I'm very happy. I'm very happy for any of you.
What have I lost?
Any of you can. Well, you seem very upset.
I haven't actually lost anything. I'm upset. I'm upset the fact that people like you are given a platform.
I know. Isn't it dreadful? Can you imagine someone like me? Can you really imagine that someone like me, who led a party in 2014 to winning a national election, something that had not been done since 1906 by either the Labour or the Conservative parties, should have a platform? Can you believe it? Isn't it ghastly? And you know, I'm happy for anyone to ring up and disagree, but please, please get your facts right, because I'm afraid that one wasn't correct. Right now, you're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:17.
It can take it.
Today was the Labour launch, and there was Jeremy Corbyn, and he was full of strong anti-establishment stuff. I am on your side, against the rich, against the big, and, you know, you can call it the most left-wing manifesto since 1983. What you couldn't doubt is the sincerity of what he was saying. And then it came to Brexit, and it all fell to pieces, because he left the impression that Labour would support perhaps having a second referendum. And then the Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, backed it up by saying, we will put a deal to Parliament and possibly to the country overall. And then within 3 hours, they've done a 180-degree U-turn, and it all looks like a complete and total and utter shambles. And I have a text here that says, Nigel, I know you fancy yourself as a politician, but commenting on someone's tie is a bit pathetic. I want to say hats off to the last caller. Believe me, if you stand in front of the country with a tie over, sort of over to the left somewhere and down from the top button, all you do is distract people away from the message you're giving. It looks ridiculous. Best, actually, whether you're wearing expensive clothes or cheap ones, to look smart and to be on parade. That's my view. Perhaps you think I'm ridiculously old-fashioned, but I generally think that is what people feel. Your texts and tweets coming in, some of them about Corbyn, one or two commenting on my own decision not to run in this election because I feel I can do more for the Brexit process leading a group in Strasbourg in the European Parliament through the next 2 years. Daniel Bagley says on Twitter, Farage has made the right decision. He can do more from Strasbourg. The Brexit campaign damaged your brand, so I guessed this is a decision based on pragmatism, tweets John Bell. Well, I don't know whether it damaged Brian Brown. We did actually win. And I had this huge criticism earlier. Syra, who was ringing in before the news, wouldn't listen. She wouldn't listen. I mean, any of you, please ring up and within reason be as rude to me as you want, but get your facts right. Mark in Wakefield says UKIP never said anything about £350 million a week. That was Boris Johnson. And Syra in Nottingham, I please hope you're listening. I know you hate me, but please don't pin that round my neck. Some agree with Syra. Great caller. Agree with her completely. Did you ask for the claim on the campaign? Did you ask for it to be changed on the campaign bus? It wasn't my campaign bus. Mine was a big open double-decker, and it said, we want our country back. And some people thought that was going over the top. I didn't. I think it helped us to win. I wonder what Birkin in Sidcup makes of today's general election politics. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you?
I'm all right. Yeah, I'm happy.
Good, so am I. But just to answer your question, I think Jeremy Corbyn is the biggest threat. I think he will win.
Do
personally. You? Yes, I listened to him today. I really did. And today I joined the Labour Party because of him.
Okay.
I think the points he hit about the top 1%, about the economy and the system being rigged, and these are points that have never been addressed by establishment MPs. Yesterday, I had to listen to Theresa May give a speech about equality from a helicopter.
Right.
You know, and I've heard all of this before from Theresa May, and I've seen her. I've studied her through PMQs. She always responds, but she doesn't answer. And this man is right now. They kept saying to me, he's a spineless leader. He's a leader who doesn't, he ain't got no backbone and whatnot. I mean, this woman, she can't even turn up to a TV debate.
Oh no! Listen, Birkin, I agree. I agree with that criticism. And by the way, I mean, be fair to me. I've said tonight and last night that there is, I think, a sincerity that many people see in Jeremy Corbyn. And I did make the point, Birkin, that there were parts of his speech today with a strong anti-establishment message that I do think will resonate with people, and you're one of them. But, Birkin, I'm going to come back to this and put this back to you. On the biggest issue upon which this election is being fought, namely Brexit, I'm left, after his comments, McDonnell's comments, and then their retractions, even more confused than I was this morning as to where the Labour Party stands on Brexit.
Okay, I'm glad you asked me that, and I'm going to give you a good answer now.
Okay, I'm waiting.
Okay, so I voted for Brexit. I voted for Brexit, and I'm a socialist. It's a socialist movement as well as a right-wing movement, and I voted for Brexit.
Yep.
But one thing I didn't vote for is a Tory Brexit. I voted for a Brexit to say goodbye to the 1%. The 1% bought the EU way before they bought this country. They bought this country way before they bought the EU. And Brexit for me was a first step. Now, what I think Labour has to do is, first things first, is stay in the single market, get our human rights done, fix the NHS, fix the schools, fix everything that needs to be fixed, and when the next election comes, then push for the hard Brexit. This has to be tactical. We can't just push.
Right. So you see Brexit as a two-stage process, yeah?
More than a two-stage. I think it's going to take around 7 years.
Right, but ultimately, Birkin, you voted for us to be a free, independent, self-governing democratic nation, the kind of socialist ideas that Tony Benn pushed for 40 years, yeah?
Yes.
Right, let me ask you one last question, because I'm enjoying this far too much to let you go. How can you then support somebody who, for 33 years in Parliament, idolised Tony Benn, supported him all the way on every single battle against European treaties, against contributions to the European Union, and then when he becomes Labour Party leader, supports Remain? How can you respect that?
I'm even glad you asked me that, and I've got an answer for that as well, Nigel.
After the show, we must meet for a beer, Burkham. Go on, please.
We have to. I live near Westminster. Let's meet for a beer.
I'd love to.
Okay, Nigel, let me answer that question.
Yeah.
Now, as you know, he is an anti-establishment politician.
Yep.
This man, everyone is against him. There is people against him in his own party. That's how we had this illusion of a two choice.
So why did he back Goldman Sachs? Why did he back Tony Blair? Why did he back all the multinational companies? Why did he back Jean-Claude Juncker? Why did this anti-establishment figure in the biggest constitutional debate we've ever had and will have, Burkhan, in our lifetimes, why did he back the establishment?
To be able to stay where he was.
That's not good enough.
Wait, Nigel.
Oh, no, come on, old son.
Speak, Nigel, let me speak.
I haven't stopped you so far, have I?
Can I answer this, Nigel?
Yeah,
please?
go on.
Okay, the party was against him. He had to stay in power, but he didn't protest. He didn't go like, yes, let's stay in here. Let's stay. He done it to make his backbenchers happy. He was afraid of his backbenchers, and he needed to stay in power. Okay, right. He did not go as far out. But now look at him now. I guarantee you, this man, he has been anti-EU his whole life. We are out.
No. Now listen,
Nigel, let's meet for that beer.
You have. Now I'll meet for the beer, Burkett. You are a complete and total star for 90% of this conversation, and then you let me down like a cheap pair of braces by telling me he's a great man because he did what his backbenchers wanted him to do. And Burkhan, leadership is about leading. Leadership is about doing things sometimes that may not be popular in the short term, but are right in the medium and long term. But we will meet for that beer, and I thank you. On Facebook, Jamie says, I'm a UKIP person who's also now voting Tory. We had a few of those last night. Joy says, you've made the right decision, Nigel. I don't trust the PM to deliver a hard Brexit. Well, I'm going to do my best, Joy, in Brussels to, literally be a lightning rod and to tell you what's going on. Because I was appalled the other week. I was at a big European summit of leaders, and I picked up in the corridors that the Foreign Office, the Brexit negotiating team, were basically saying we're happy to concede the idea of taking back our fisheries if we can get a better trade deal. I've written about this in the Daily Telegraph. It's online. You can watch it after this show. Leslie says, I'd love to see the look on Juncker and others' faces knowing that you will be there at the heart of Europe. And Michael says, how does it feel to be partly responsible for the dismantling of the fabric of this great country you swear you hold so dear? Well, Michael, you can take whatever view you like. You can take any election to be a disaster if you don't like the result. But we got the one we got, and we are leaving the European Union, Michael. Get with it. If it's too much, just pour yourself another drink. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30 and time for the news with Rupert Bartier. Jeremy Corbyn today launched the Labour Party's big bid for the general election on June the 8th, and many of you admire his strong stance against the rich, against the 1% who own far too much, against the power of big businesses, against the fact that ordinary folk don't get an even break. Big, strong, anti-establishment, hard left-wing stuff that has won, I think, the support of many. But when it came to Brexit, oh dear, 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 it was a complete and utter shambles, and we end the day, I think, more confused as to where Her Majesty's loyal opposition stand on this great issue than we did at the start of the day. And I'm asking you, are the Labour Party a serious, credible threat to the Conservatives in this general election? I frankly don't see, after today's launch, how they can be. Also, I've announced tonight I will not be standing in this general election, believing I can help the Brexit cause better, given my front row seat in the European Parliament in Strasbourg, overseeing these Brexit negotiations and the final vote, where the European Parliament may have a veto. So I'm taking calls, texts, tweets, Facebook messages on all of those things. And on text I get, totally understand your decision not to stand at the election, but hope in 2019 after Brexit you will stand for UKIP at the earliest by-election. We will need you in Parliament, says Jan from Bromley. You're very sweet, but there are 2 torrid years to go before I'll even think about that. And Steve on Twitter says, don't you think a large majority would be bad for the country? Well, one of the criticisms of Mrs Thatcher was that when she got a majority of 144 in 1983, frankly, it was too big, and she wasn't being held to account for things that were done in Parliament. Whether you agree with that or disagree with that, going back to the 80s, the prospect of Mrs May having a majority, according to some of the experts, of 140 or 150 seats, means they are really completely going to be in power and without anyone holding them to account, which is why I say that I think in the last couple of weeks you will see smaller parties start to do better in the polls as people feel freer to vote for parties they really support, knowing that the outcome is going to be a Tory win anyway. Why do you say that General Election 17 is all about Brexit? Didn't we already have that referendum? NHS, education, etc., also important, says Andrew Says. Yeah, they are all very important, but don't delude yourself. Brexit will dominate this debate over the course of the next 6 weeks. Nigel, Corbyn can say what he likes. His MPs don't respect him. His policy of no second referendum means nothing when the leader is not in control, says Steve in Winchester. And what I love here, David in Northern Ireland says, glad you're staying in the European Parliament, Nigel. We need you there to make sure the European gangsters keep the violin cases under the table. David, I don't recommend you visit Brussels anytime soon. You'd be even less popular than I am. But I'm going to ask Pat from House and Regis. Pat, how do you feel? How do you feel? Either about my decision not to stand or about Corbyn being a credible threat?
Evening, Nigel.
Good evening.
I feel you've made a very poor decision.
Yep.
I'm very disappointed as a UKIP member and a supporter.
Yep.
I also think, whereas you've strengthened UKIP, to a certain extent, we had 6 million votes in the last election. The vast majority of those votes will just swave over to the Tories, and I think then you'll be responsible for the demise of UKIP.
Oh, thank you.
It will just fold. It will just fold. Because
well, let's get the facts right, Pat, first.
Well, can I just finish? If you were standing in Clacton, you will bolster that support all over the country. They know you're there. They know you're going to do well. And it will bolster the support for UKIP. UKIP will be around, and we need UKIP. If UKIP go, then who's going to look after the indigenous population, which is in the majority? That no one's talking about immigration either. None of the parties are talking about immigration. We're back to square one, regardless of Brexit.
Pat, let me just get some facts right here. UKIP got 4.5 million votes in the European elections of 14, and it got 3.9 million votes in a general election of 15.
Okay.
Interestingly, nearly half of the voters in 14 switched to the Tories, mostly through fear of the SNP. So between 2014 and 15, 6 million people did vote UKIP. So you're right, but I just wanted to get some sort of context on that.
Yeah.
Pat, you know, I've spent a quarter of a century helping to build this party. I had a big lunchtime meeting with Paul Nuttall yesterday. I've been on the phone with him today. I intend to help him and support him in any way I can over the course of the next 6.5 weeks. But I do have, Pat, on a UKIP ticket, a very responsible job in the European Parliament, leading not just UKIP MEPs, but other Eurosceptic MEPs from across the rest of Europe. And in terms of, and I get your point, short term, some will say, well, if Nigel was standing, it might help all of us. But actually, I'm not going away, Pat. I'm going to be around. I'm going to be appearing on shows. I'm going to be travelling around. But, Pat, in terms of Brexit, in terms of the process, I feel I can do more in the European Parliament than I could as a backbench MP.
Well, I still think you're wrong.
Okay.
And I hope UKIP do not fold after the election. But I think if there's a poor showing, a really poor showing, that will see the end of UKIP. And we need a party that we can trust to support us. The Brexiteers are the ones that didn't want immigration. That was mainly on it. And
I get all of that.
About that anymore, are they? They're not talking about it.
I get all of that, Pat, and UKIP has a very important role in British politics. It's far from finished. I agree with that point wholly. Robert in Watford, are Labour going to provide a credible opposition campaign to Theresa May?
I'd like to say yes. I mean, they've got some good ideas, but I think with him as the leader, I don't think they stand a chance. Like I said, if you had either of the Miliband's or a Chuck or a Mooner, I think they would stand a chance. But he's got good ideas, and I agree with a lot of them, but I just don't think he wields any... He doesn't have any show of power in any way, shape or form, does he, really?
What, a lack of authority, Robert? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you think about him going up against, say, like a Trump or a Putin, it would be just mincemeat, wouldn't it?
Well,
let's be honest.
Most people struggle up against a Trump or a Putin.
Yeah, I get that, but I mean, it was, you know what I mean? He'd be a quivering little wreck, wouldn't he?
Well, I don't know about that. He might even do his tie-up. You never know. So Robert, he's got some good ideas, but he's not really doesn't cut the mustard as far as you're concerned. So, how will you vote?
This is going to annoy you, but I'm going to go with the Liberals.
Well, I wish there was a Liberal Party. They went a long time ago. Do you mean the Lib Dems?
That's the ones I went, yes. So the Lib
That's
Dems,
right,
yeah.
the ones who are neither Liberal nor Democratic, but are probably going to do much better in this election. Robert, interesting you say that, because today's the day with Bob Marshall-Andrews. Bob Marshall-Andrews QC, a really very well-known veteran Labour figure who held the Rochester and Stroud seat for them, I think in 2 or 3, I can't even remember, maybe even 3 general elections he won. And I remember appearing with him on Question Time and various other programmes, a very, very lively, entertaining, strong Labour character. And Bob Marshall-Andrews today defected to the Liberal Democrats. So you're another... I don't know whether they call you Bob, Robert, but there's a couple of Bobs.
I answer to both, don't worry.
You answer to both. So there's a couple of Bobs going in the Lib Dems' direction, and these current opinion polls put Labour on about 25%. One or two say 24%. A lot of the experts will tell you that this is the absolute rock bottom that Labour can ever sink to, and they're going to bounce from here over the next few weeks. And just looking at that total, I'm sorry, but shambles of a launch when it comes to Brexit. Maybe some great stuff on other things. I think they could fall further still, and
There is something I'd like to ask you, Nigel.
You do.
If that's okay. It's about the whole 350 thing with NHS.
I never did that. I mean, don't blame me for that, mate.
But... No. I'm sorry, but it was you that was photographed in front of that bus.
I wasn't. No,
I wasn't. You were.
I wasn't.
Okay, then this
urban myth here. Anyway, go on. Ask the question.
The very next day on GMTV, when Susan Reid asked you about it, you said, "Oh, that was a misunderstanding." You never come round and said that was nothing to do with you. You only said that after the fact.
Do you know, sometimes, Robert, sometimes in life, things get stuck in people's minds that are not correct. You know, the famous urban myths. I never, ever, it was Boris that appeared with this 350 million a week. And do you know something? I'll tell you this. I had dinner with Michael Gove, a private dinner with Michael Gove during the campaign, and I said, that figure, Michael, is crackers. You know,
that may have been in private.
Make it 200 million a week, and it would be credible. But this figure is too high, and I begged them to get rid of it, and they didn't. But please, you know, you can criticise me for all the things I've said and all the things I've done, but not the ones that I'm not directly responsible for.
Also, in the debates, again, before the Brexit vote, when the whole Project Fear did their thing, they will question you about it. Again, you weren't saying then that's nothing to do with you. You're changing your story. That's why.
No, I'm not changing my story, Robert, in Watford. I do many things, but I don't change my story. It's nothing to do with me. I'm going to get Boris in one night and get him to grovel and apologise to me and everybody. But, Robert, I thank you very much for your call. Labour voter there, going Lib Dem. Don't think he's on his own. Right now, you're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:45. Well, Jeremy Corbyn has launched, and some big, strong, anti-establishment stuff that is resonating with some, but on Brexit it was a shambles, and I've announced I'm not going to stand in this election because I think I can do a better job for Brexit leading a group in the European Parliament. Andrew on Facebook says to me, is it not possible to be an MP and an MEP? Can't you quantum leap between the two places at once? Andrew, no, it was, and I remember when I first got elected there, Ian Paisley, the late Ian Paisley, the Reverend, was an MEP, an MP, and a member of the Stormers' Assembly. But no, the rules are very clear. You can only be in one parliament at a time. Otherwise, I would not have an issue with this, and I would have put my name forward for the general election. But I am really fascinated whether you think that Corbyn can, over the course of the next few weeks, you know, I mean, he obviously talked the talk today that he's going to surprise everybody. He had to say that. But is he going to provide credible opposition over the next few weeks? I just don't think he can. I really don't think he can. If you cannot articulate a simple message on a dominant issue of the campaign, then to me, what hope have you got? But maybe AO in Leicester is going to put me right.
Hello there, Nigel. Nice to speak to you.
Good evening.
I've got a question for you. So you capitalised on this anti-establishment sort of, view that a lot of people have in the UK, and then Brexit happened.
Yes.
You had Donald Trump in America who capitalised on a similar thing, and
that's true.
He won.
That's true.
And today you've got Jeremy Corbyn, who's, as you said many a time on your podcast, has a message that will resonate with quite a few people. In fact, a lot of people who probably voted for Brexit could empathise with what he said about being anti-establishment. So why can't he be or win in 7 weeks?
Well, that is a very, very good question, because I looked at the text of that speech and I sort of half saw it live. And do you know what? I had the same thought as you, that some of that rhetoric was similar to the Brexit campaign. It was similar to the Trump campaign. And somehow, coming from a North London intellectual socialist, it just doesn't seem to be somehow quite believable.
Why not? He's a man who stood up for working people, or for the people who are, the most disadvantaged, the least advantaged in society, for all of his political career. And now you have him standing up as leader of the Labour Party, coming out and saying, "Look, guys, I'm here for you." Why aren't people going to vote for him?
I do understand.
And sorry, let me cut you off again. I do apologise.
Go on,
I just want to get one thing. Yeah. One point I want to make is you are a fascinating human being. I watched your life stories with Piers Morgan.
Yeah.
That was, and even though I probably disagree with 99% of what you say, I honestly, I kind of warm to you. I have to be honest. But the way you went about Brexit, I mean, you know, it's something to admire, even though I probably disagree with.
Well, I was out.
It's something to admire.
I was out to win, wasn't I? I was out to win.
Absolutely, you were for so many years, and you have, you know what, you have. Even though I'm completely against Brexit, I would say you have to admire that. Now you've got a guy who's been campaigning for 20, 30 years, similar to what you did.
Yeah.
Using a similar message that you have, or capitalizing on people, on the same people that you did. Why can't he win?
Right. I thank you for your generous personal comments, and you're a true Democrat, because to actually have a half-grudging respect for someone you disagree with is what democracy actually should be about. And I have a half-grudging respect for Jeremy Corbyn in the sense that he's not your typical backstabbing career politician. He doesn't speak about people badly, you know, when he's off camera. He doesn't do that. And I do think the anti-establishment stuff that he puts out, I think he believes it, and he's always believed it. I'm not sure that it quite resonates, but my problem, AO, and I've said this before tonight, but I'm going to say it again to you, my problem is, how can I take him as being utterly sincere when on this crucial issue of Brexit, when Corbyn, as one of the arch-Bennites, who ever since he first entered Parliament in 1983 has argued, and indeed John McDonnell is deputy too, they both argued that EU membership destroyed British democracy and was bad for working people, and now they're part of the Remain camp, and they still appear to be there.
I think, as I would have to agree with that today, was really unclear. I think that will be cleared up over the next few days anyway.
Oh, but hang on. It's only a 6-week campaign, and like it or not, this will be the dominant issue of the campaign. And to get off on the start they have today, frankly, is catastrophic.
No, I appreciate that absolutely, but that'll be cleared up in the next few days. If he's got his I read something today where it was like 7 or 8 of his different policies. I saw it on a Facebook post that he shared himself on his personal Facebook, and every single one of those policies, I think, will resonate with a lot or the majority of people in this country. And I want to put this to you now, if he clears up Brexit and says Brexit means Brexit, just like Theresa did, right? Will you back him in this election?
Well, I tell you what.
You've said this on your whole pod, on the whole, you know, on however long you've been on the radio today, you said, I agree with, you know, with morally, what he's saying, I agree with most of it, but just this one thing, Brexit was something that
do you know what, Ao? I tell you what I do. If he comes clean and says, look, I did back Remain in the referendum because otherwise I could not have stayed as leader of the Labour Party. I'm sorry, it was not the most honest decision of my life, but I'm now going to come clean. I think Brexit's a very good thing, and we in the Labour Party will harry the government and make sure that the British people get the best possible deal from it. Not only will my respect for Corbyn go up, but I will then say, AO, on this show, that actually he is a credible alternative to Theresa May in this general election. I thank you for your fascinating call. On Facebook, Justin says, Nigel, what exactly can you do more in the European Parliament? Please enlighten us. Thanks. I'm going to repeat this, we leave at the end of March. In May, there are European elections. All around me, there are MEPs saying we're going to punish Britain. Even if you negotiate a good deal, at the end of the 2 years, we are going to veto it. So what I want to do, and like it or not, Justin, I've got a very big profile with media across the entire European Union. In fact, I'm probably more than any other MEP out there in Brussels and Strasbourg. I want to go to Munich and give a speech. I want to go to Reims in France and give a speech. I want to go to Bruges in Belgium and give a speech. I want to make media. I want to say to people, don't vote for MEPs who will veto a sensible free trade deal with the United Kingdom, because that will cost you jobs in your area. And I want to try and exert as much pressure on those MEPs and on the next European elections as I possibly can. And I think I'm the only person in a position, frankly, that could do that. Good evening, Nigel. Whoever mistakes your good self for Boris Johnson, re the $350 million a week, should go to Specsavers, says Gaynor in Hull. Thank you, Gaynor. The bus suggestion. Nigel was part of the Grassroots Out campaign. The bus was from Vote Leave, says Claire, and she's absolutely right. And I'm going to ask Kim in Newcastle. Kim, could Corbyn pose a threat in this election? Is he credible?
Yeah, he's definitely credible, and I think he is the underdog, which makes him favourable to some people.
Yes, I get that. And Brexit was the underdog, and Trump was the underdog, and underdogs can win sometimes, but when they're 23 points behind in the polls, goodness gracious me.
Well, you know what? You can't trust politicians nowadays, right?
I think a lot of people agree with that.
Yeah. So how can we evaluate how to judge these human beings? Maybe how they deal with the weak, the vulnerable in society? Do you not think that's a good argument?
Well, Kim, I mean, one argument is to evaluate how they deal with the weak. Another argument is to evaluate how much wealth they can create so we got the money to help support the weak. And these are all the great arguments. Kim, I'm going to have to let you go. I've run out of time. I apologise. There are loads of you that want to get involved in this debate tonight. My final thought is, whilst we're obsessing on the general election, on whether Corbyn looked like a bit of a dud today, on whether May is sincere, something else is going on across the channel. On this Sunday, the French presidential election will go through its first round. There are 4 candidates vying to get through for the runoff to the last 2. I will predict now that Marine Le Pen will get through to the final round. I don't know who she'll be against, whether it's the ex-Prime Minister Fillon, whether it's Macron, whether it's the outside left-winger Mélenchon, I don't know. But look at those French elections. They matter hugely, because when that second round comes on the 7th of May, if Le Pen was to win, then Brexit, frankly, was nothing. It'll be the end of the European project. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show on LBC. I'm back on Monday evening from 7 when we know the result. Coming up at 10, it's Ian Collins, but up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you, and we'll continue this conversation after the news at 8. Jeremy Corbyn, as we've been hearing, he's vowed to